You're watching Rogers TV.
Number one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, March 25th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, 10 degrees. In Smiths Falls, 9. And here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. It is make or break for the federal carbon tax. Supreme Court set to deliver a landmark ruling this morning deciding if the federal price on pollution is constitutional. Here's City News Parliament Hill reporter Cormac McSweeney.
It all comes down to this. Years of political attacks and legal challenges will be decided by our country's top court, and the ruling will likely cause political shockwaves no matter which way it goes. Conservatives have long campaigned against the carbon tax, and the provinces of Alberta, Ontario, and Saskatchewan launched legal battles claiming it's unconstitutional because it infringes on their taxation powers. But the federal government says climate change is a matter of national importance, and it's their jurisdiction. The law was passed in 2018, setting a minimum price on carbon emissions. If provinces don't meet it, then the feds impose a system of their own and return 90% of the tax to consumers through a rebate. If the Trudeau government fails in this legal fight, then it loses the centerpiece to its climate change plan, which would be a significant setback in hitting our international targets. Cormac McSweeney, Parliament Hill.
Now, the federal Conservatives introducing a motion today in the House to get 3 senior Liberal staffers or the Prime Minister himself to testify before the Commons about the We Charity affair. They also want the former Chief of Staff to the Defence Minister to shed more light on sexual misconduct issues in the Canadian Armed Forces. Now, the motion says the staffers would not have to testify if Prime Minister Justin Trudeau were to show up instead and testify for at least 3 hours. Previous Conservative efforts to get witnesses to testify, though, have been thwarted. They hope to force the issue by putting it to a vote on the floor of the House of Commons. City News Time 9:02, and now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
We'll have varying amounts of sun and cloud today and a warm high, possibly record-setting high, 20 degrees today, a gusty southwest wind. For tonight, showers late this evening. We get into the steady rain overnight, the low near 8, and a wet, windy Friday, rain at times heavy, may even mix with snow Friday night. Tomorrow's high near 10. For today, the high, 20.
And right now in Ottawa, 10 degrees. In Smiths Falls, it's 9. A national vaccine advisory panel looking into research suggesting people who have already had COVID-19 get enough protection from just one dose of a vaccine. The chair of the National Advisory Committee on Immunization is warning the presence of antibodies is not in itself a sign of protection, and they are not all created equal. A letter in the New England Journal of Medicine suggests, based on a small study, people who have been infected may produce more antibodies after the first dose of a vaccine compared to someone who has not had COVID-19. That research is yet to be peer-reviewed. Smiths Falls Council condemning MPP Randy Hillier's COVID-19 rule-breaking. Hillier represents a riding of Lanark, Frontenac, Kingston, and has been breaking public health rules throughout the pandemic. Smiths Falls Mayor Sean Pankow calls Hillier's behavior reckless and irresponsible.
Knowing that these are measures that are taken with great contemplation, with a full comprehensive understanding of the impact of these decisions, and the reality is that the risk is far greater to the people of our communities and ourselves if we don't follow them.
Now, the township of South Frontenac asking local municipality support to condemn the actions of Hillier. Smiths Falls Council passed a resolution on Monday echoing the township of South Frontenac's stance, saying council does not condone Hillier's anti-mask and anti-lockdown rhetoric. I'm Andrew Boyle. For News Anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Separating headlines
from hearsay.
It's the Rob Snow Show on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Oh, it's a big news day. It's a big news day. And I love big news days. And if you love big news days, oh, you have found the right radio station, everybody. Good morning. This is the Rob Snow Show on City News. What's happening today? Well, it is the day after the biggest spending budget in Ontario's history. The biggest spending budget in Ontario's history from the Premier, who used to say, the party is over. The party with the taxpayers' money is over. Premier used to talk about stopping gravy trains. He's driving the gravy train. Doug Ford will go down as the biggest spending premier in Ontario's history because, remember, his last budget was the biggest spending budget in Ontario's history. And, so was the one before that. Before anyone had even heard of coronavirus, COVID-19. And yet, all his critics on the left can do is say, what? You're not spending enough. It's the most ever, but it's still not enough. Now, we're all over the reaction to the Ontario budget today. The Minister of Finance for Ontario's Peter Bethlenfalvy, we're trying to get him on the show tomorrow. He's scheduled to be in our town tomorrow. So we're just nailing down a time for him to come on tomorrow's program. But today, Andrea Horwath on the show this morning, the leader of the opposition in the Ontario legislature, the leader of Ontario's New Democrats, spoke to her this morning, and she has many, many, many issues with this budget, specifically on education spending. Her party was also calling for paid sick days. Nothing about that in the Ontario budget either. So that interview coming up right after the 9:30 news. But before that, someone else who's not impressed with this budget, and I would hardly call him a left-winger. He is Randall Denley. And he is a columnist for Post Media, focuses on the Ford government for both the National Post and the Ottawa Citizen. Encourage you to read his column in the opinion section of the Citizen this morning, where he writes, quote, every old, tired idea in the government playbook gets new life in this budget. And he will expand on that. When Randall Denley joins me in a few minutes from now, he's with us every Thursday. Even less impressed, if that's possible, even less impressed than Randall Denley with Doug Ford's latest budget is Andrew Coyne in the Globe and Mail this morning. I mean, this is the opening line of the Andrew Coyne column in the Globe this morning about this latest Ontario government budget from the PCs. Quote, somewhere in the bowels of Ottawa, officials are quietly preparing contingency plans for a bailout of Newfoundland should that become necessary. They may wish to add Ontario to their plans. End quote. And wowza. This is Ontario. This is Ontario. Not perennial have-not Newfoundland. This is Ontario. This is supposed to be the economic engine of the Dominion, the economic heartland of the country. 40% of Canada's economic activity happens in this province. And Andrew Coyne says, we are on pace to have a debt load in percentage terms, a debt load that rivals the debt of Newfoundland and Labrador. And what did I tell you? During the depths of the economic crisis, during the lockdowns, in the earliest days of the pandemic, we know it. We know it. There was a brief period of time during this pandemic when the Bank of Canada had to come to the rescue of Newfoundland and Labrador because nobody anywhere in the global bond market would buy Newfoundland and Labrador bonds. The Bank of Canada was the buyer of last resort so that Newfoundland and Labrador could, for example, keep the lights on in its hospitals during a pandemic or keep its schools open or public servants could get paid. And Andrew Coyne is saying, you know what? The way things are going in Ontario, we're not far behind. I mean, it's scary stuff. It's scary stuff. The day after the biggest spending budget in Ontario's history, and wings and prayers are all you get when it comes to getting back to a balanced budget sometime before the end of this decade. That will be a big focus for us this morning. You bet it will. But it's a big news day. Oh, it's a big news day. That's not the only big story in the mix. One other, carbon tax. The carbon tax. The Justin Trudeau carbon tax, he doesn't call it a carbon tax. He used to call it a price on carbon. He doesn't even call it that anymore. Now it's the price on pollution. What do you mean you don't want a price on pollution, you dinosaur? You must be pro-pollution if you don't want to put a price on pollution. So the carbon tax has become the price on pollution. They're diabolical with the language, aren't they? It's set to increase, whatever you call it. It's set to go up by 33%. The Justin Trudeau carbon tax, price on carbon, price on pollution goes up 33% 1 week from today. That'll do wonders for the price of gasoline. But is it even constitutional? That's what we're about to find out. We should find out within the hour. Can the government of Canada, in the name of peace, order, and good government, impose a carbon tax on a provincial government? Or is that an unconstitutional intrusion of federal power into the exclusive domain of the provinces? Ontario, Saskatchewan, and Alberta, all led by conservative governments, all argued that Justin Trudeau's carbon tax was unconstitutional. BC sided with the federal government. Of course they did. They love higher taxes in British Columbia, where driving is evil. Repent, 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 and take the bus. The appeal courts in Ontario and Saskatchewan sided with the federal government. The appeal court of Alberta sided with the provinces. So now all is to be settled and revealed by the Supreme Court of Canada, probably before 10 o'clock this morning, the good money on a Trudeau victory. If the federal argument is the losing argument, it is probably just going to be parts of the act that are found to be unconstitutional. And the likely scenario in that case would see the High Court tell the government, you have to rewrite the act or parts of the act, and we'll give you a year to come up with something that could pass another years-long constitutional challenge. So we should know that ruling anytime now. Breaking news, breaking news. We'll do the breaking news thing, you know. The media is actually being briefed in a lockup on this ruling right now. Nothing says national unity like a good old dust-up over federal provincial powers. Then, for the trifecta, on this biggest of news days, there's an Auditor General's report coming out this afternoon. And it could be a real doozy. The Auditor General of Canada is Karen Hogue, and her office, her team, investigating all the pandemic-related relief programs, all of those hundreds of billions of dollars that Mr. Trudeau was announcing every second day outside the comfy confines of Rideau Cottage. The two biggies being the CERB, the $2,000 a month, and the Canada Wage Subsidy. Was that money well spent, or was it money, well, spent? Gone to money heaven. Her office has also been investigating pandemic preparedness. How prepared were we? That could be a whopper too. How prepared were we? I mean, this is the country that lived through SARS less than 2 decades ago. We know the emergency stockpile was a gong show. The pandemic surveillance team went from being the envy of the world to being gutted. And the auditor's team has also been reviewing the situation with border controls. You remember the mayhem in the earliest of days at the Pearson Airport, the Montreal Airport? You got to get home. You got to get home. And the hordes of people making their way through the airport. So that is going to be a big news story this morning. Auditor General of Canada releases report on pandemic, the government's handling of the pandemic, and the CERB. Count on it. Supposed to be released in the 2 o'clock hour. We'll be all over it here at City News. I mean, just think about the CERB, just on the CERB, okay? What we know about the CERB and who was collecting the CERB. A lot of people needed the CERB. Don't get me wrong. I get it. But did 15-year-olds need to get the CERB? We know, for example, because of the gumshoe reporting by the team at Blacklock's reporter, that the Trudeau government paid out more than $650 million in CERB to teenagers. Teenagers, $650 million. More than 40,000 people in the 9th grade were getting checks. $2,000 a month in the 9th grade. Can you imagine, in the 9th grade? What did they do with it? When it was first announced, and again, no doubt, a lot of that money went to people who needed it, no doubt. But when it was first announced, the budget for that program was $24 billion. It ended up costing more than $80 billion by the time all was said and done. So what are the chances that some of that money went where it wasn't supposed to go? I would say pretty good. Pretty good. I'll take those odds any day. Big news day. And you're in the middle of it all. Whenever we talk about the big news of the day, we put you right in the middle of it, and we get your opinions on it during the talkback hour between 10 and 11 o'clock. Opinions, phone calls, 750-1310. You know, it's budget season. Ontario just had its budget. Quebec's budget will come out soon. Next month, the first budget from the Trudeau Liberals in more than 2 years. And, I mean, the numbers are eye-watering, right? They're eye-watering. Debt, deficit, far as the eye can see, they make the eyes water. My question for you today is this. Is it really okay to stick the next generation with the bill for all of this pandemic spending? Are we really going to stick it to the next generation? Or should these premiers, should this prime minister be coming up with plans to make sure the next generation, heck, generations, aren't stuck footing the bill for all of this pandemic-related spending? I mean, think about it. When it comes to climate change, what do you hear all the time about the fight against climate change? The whole thing is always framed as, you have to do it for the kids. You have to do it for those coming behind you, the next generation. Think about the planet you want your children to inherit. All well and good, but shouldn't the same apply? Finances. We've spent the cupboard bare, ladies and gentlemen, bare and then some. Are you really going to stick the next generation with the bill? This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
It's a space that needs to be lived in. It's a space that people, have to have an experience of more than just art on the walls. I think, yes, the art on the walls is fun, and it's fun to walk around and see all the beautiful things, and the way Dominic and Edith have curated the gallery is certainly something worth seeing. But coming by and asking questions, again, to Dominic's point of view is, interrupt him, ask questions. I'm here on most of the days too. We have Luce that comes in, Nancy that comes in. So yeah, we have quite a few opportunities for people to come in and see the process, and of course ask a few questions. It's a great space. Basically, the one event that we did do, is the jazz shows, the jazz and blues shows. And I think the weird thing to let you know is that the acoustics in here are really amazing. I think that was the first thing that blew me away when we started doing shows, or when I was helping out with the shows. The other part of the business too is we do rent it out for special occasions too. So a few weddings, birthday parties, product launches, that kind of thing. So they're also a lot of fun. We do have one artist that's from the States, but of the 30 odd artists, the rest are from either Quebec, Ontario, and one beautiful woman from BC. It's definitely part of the philosophy to maintain and canvas and show the beauty that we have in our backyard. You have the very, very strong personalities in Edith and Dominic, of course. It's wonderful to see how that actually balances out in the rest of the gallery. Without necessarily being, an objective, we basically have half female artists and half male artists in this gallery. But I can't say it's anything more than choosing the best people, and that's just the way it is. And I love that. I think it's great. You go through and you're like, wow, it's all pretty cool. And yep, it's half are women and half are men. It's cool. Like everyone else, we didn't know what to think, right? It's overwhelming at first. You just know that things are closed. And now you're trying to figure out what you do during that downtime, which I think everyone did. And I think in March, the first close, the first shutdown, It was a lot of actually recuperating and resting and not worrying too much on the spot. Running a gallery is a bit like running a marathon with sprints. So there comes a time where, it's actually nice to just take a break. And then you wake up and realize that, okay, now it's time to wake up and deal with this new reality. From my perspective anyways, I think a gallery can be overwhelming, and I like to make it fun. So you're going to come in, I'll ask you questions, I might even joke around with you. The most people come here, they're not really going to buy art, but they could have a fun time and talk about it, right? And one of the things the gallery does offer is for local purchases, we'll be happy to drive it to your house and hang it for you.
Firm.
Fair.
Fun.
The Rob Snow Show returns
On Rogers TV and City News 101.1.
Let's get right into the budget reaction. Randall Denley from Post Media joins me this morning on the Rob Snow Show on City News. Good morning.
Good morning, Rob.
Well, I've been where you are. When you sit down and you're going to write something, and the words that come to you are, it's hard to know where to begin. It's not going to be a glowing review. So what's wrong with the budget from the Ford government?
Well, I think it's fine probably for this year, because we knew there'd be a lot of spending on health and a lot of spending on economic support, Rob. But what I think is really disappointing about this budget is every year after this year, basically the government's throwing up its hands and says, well, big deficits from here to the end of the decade, nothing we can really do. And there's no real plan to bring them down either. It's just exactly the same kind of thing the Liberals gave us year after year. What's your plan to reduce the deficit? Well, look at this little table we've drawn up. It shows a smaller number every year until we get to zero. And, of course, they never got to zero because there's no plan. There's no plan from these guys either. They've just moved into a whole other zone where, well, what can you do? Big deficits, they're just a thing. But we're already so deeply in debt that we just can't keep going like this. And if anybody was going to realize that, to me, it would be the Ford government. So when they looked at the situation they're in, they said, well, we could raise taxes, cut something, or rely on really big economic growth. Raise taxes, no, we don't want to do that. Cut something, no way. So really big growth, let's go with that. I mean, it is a good thing if it happens.
Yeah.
But if you look at their plan to do it, they're going to spend billions of dollars. But it's all the same old stuff they've always done. Let's have some regional development funds. Let's have some grants for this industry, grants for that industry, grants for everything under the sun. Because as everybody knows, especially conservatives, the way you build a strong economy is through government grant programs. And so, no, wait, if that was true, wouldn't we have a booming economy now? Because we have had government grant programs for years. It's just the least imaginative and I think least effective approach they could take. But it's the kind of popular thing that we're so used to seeing, where a good budget is one where everybody thinks they're going to get money. And speaking of everybody getting money, somehow it's an economic boost to say, look, parents and COVID, and okay, they already get a lot of support from the province and a lot of support from the federal government, but we'll have more money. All right, let's give them more money. I think it's $500 or $600 a year per child. And it doesn't matter what your family income is. So you could be making $500,000.
Doesn't matter.
No, the government.
You could be the CEO of Hydro One.
Yep.
Right?
You're eligible to get it as long as you got kids. To me, that's just kind of thoughtless spending that's only meant to be popular. But what will it accomplish? You're not achieving anything by giving money to rich people, especially when you're going out and borrowing the money and giving it to people who don't need it. That's not what I expect from a PC government. It's what we've been conditioned to expect from previous Liberal governments. Certainly if the NDP was in, Andrea Horwath made it quite clear yesterday that she'd be spending way more money than Doug Ford because there are bigger numbers in the universe and she likes them. So I just see Ontarians in a very bad position right now, Rob. If the most, fiscally aware party we've got is the PCs, and this is what they've got to offer, and everything else goes downhill from there. this is not where we want to be, because the province does have a structural deficit. I mean, that means that we can't afford the things we've got right now, much less anything else.
Well, yeah, that's it. I mean, the old Liberal mantra used to be, well, we're not too worried about the debt because the economy is going to keep growing. And, our favorite metric is going to be debt to GDP. And as long as there's GDP growth, we don't really have to worry about the growth of the debt. But you do have to worry about these structural costs. I mean, healthcare is not getting cheaper as the years go by. It's only going to get more expensive. Anybody who's done any kind of investigation, and I know you've done volumes of reporting on this, that what is ahead for us just in the costs of long-term care, you ain't seen nothing yet. What are our pension obligations for all of these people who are about to retire from the broader public service? What if interest rates go up on this already considerable debt? There are all of these structural things that are baked in already, and there doesn't seem to be any, at least right from this budget, any serious attempt to even recognize that that's the reality.
No, because they don't want to tell people that, because then they say, well, that is a problem. What are you going to do about it? And the correct answer probably should be raise taxes. Any party that proposes more spending, in my opinion, that's fine. If you think more spending is required and the public supports it, pay for it. Own it by raising taxes. We want this great new service, these great new programs. Here's what it's going to cost you, folks. So your taxes are going to have to pay for it. Well, then that lets people say, okay, well, I liked it when it's being free, but do I want to pay more for it? Well, maybe they do. But we're just kidding ourselves now in a serious way by pretending that we can afford all that we have. We can complain that what we have is not nearly enough, and we can demand more when we're just running a tab to pay for it. And that doesn't end anywhere good. And as you say, it takes away all the flexibility the government needs to have in the future, because we know healthcare in particular is going to go up, and that's the most important thing they do. So how do we pay for that as people get older? I think this is just to me, it's a surprisingly lazy and irresponsible budget.
Okay.
Other than that, I liked it, though.
Other than that, you liked it.
Yeah.
Do you think there'll be a change of tone next year?
Well, next year's a bit of a worry, because that's your budget going into the election, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
That's the one where you would expect the government to be going to the bank to borrow money and say, "Oh, all the great new stuff we're going to do for you folks. How are you going to pay for it? Don't you worry about that."
Yeah.
It's almost Trudeau-esque, I think, in a sense that once your deficit gets to a certain number and you can't see a way to get out of it, you just kind of give up and go with it and say, well, the advantage of these deficits, though, is that we can spend money on new programs and people will be happy. We can send checks to all sorts of folks and they're going to love it. It's certainly working for the federal Liberals. And in some, base way, it's probably going to work for the provincial Conservatives too, but it's not what the province needs, and they know that. And I think it was a bad day for them, because this budget is so off-brand for PCs. It could have been delivered by the former Liberal Finance Minister, Charles Sousa. He could have read this out and been very pleased with himself for having presented it. Okay. To me, that's a good test of failure if you're a PC.
Okay. Thank you for this morning, Randall Denley.
My pleasure, Rob.
Yeah. Read his column. It's in the opinion section of the Ottawa Citizen this morning, headlined, Ontarians Face Years of Deficits. Postmedia columnist Randall Denley. Andrea Horwath, the leader of Ontario's New Democrats, joins me after the news on City News.
local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, March 25th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now, 11 degrees in Ottawa. It's 12 degrees in Smiths Falls. And here's what's making news this hour. Renault Road is closed to traffic again today from Anderson Road to Joshua Street. Now, police say this closure is for an undetermined period of time and for an ongoing police operation. People are asked to avoid the area again between Anderson and Joshua on Renault Road for an undetermined period of time today. Supreme Court of Canada poised to make a pivotal decision on the federal act that imposed a minimum price on greenhouse gas emissions in some provinces. The court will decide whether the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act is constitutional. It follows challenges to the law from Ontario, Alberta, and Saskatchewan. The chair of the National Advisory Committee on Immunization says the committee is debating the question just how many vaccine doses are required by someone who has been infected with COVID-19. Some studies have suggested people who have had COVID may produce the required antibody response with just a single dose of vaccine. City News Time, 9:32. I'm Andrew Boyle. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
He's a pillar of community opinion.
The Rob Snow Show returns
On Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM
And 1310 AM.
It is the biggest spending budget in Ontario's history, and according to forecasts, it could take 8 or 9 years to eliminate Ontario's budget deficit. Let's get some political reaction to yesterday's Ontario budget. The leader of the opposition at Queen's Park joins us, the leader of Ontario's New Democrats, Andrea Horwath. Good morning.
Good morning, Rob.
What do you think about the budget?
Well, I think this budget really should have been about help and hope, help for people to get through these next several months. Pandemic's not over. The government didn't even talk about the third wave. Stopped, but people need that help to get through and hope that there's going to be a future that they can look forward to. And I think this budget really does rob people of that hope.
Okay. Where does it come up short, in your opinion?
Well, we see about $4.8 billion in program spending cuts, which means that when people needed help the most, not only were the investments not there for them, but we're all seeing instead the cuts that we knew that were likely coming. And I can say that if it were my budget, I certainly would have done something differently. If New Democrats were putting this budget forward in this time frame, in this context with COVID, there's just a lot of investments that we would have made sure were in there that aren't. And I can rail them off, but of course, as you know, at the top of the list would be long-term care and education.
Okay. Well, let's go. You say cuts. What's being cut?
Well, about $1 billion from education. That's a real worry when we know that kids have struggled so much. Parents have worked really hard to support them, but kids have struggled. And I know the education workers and teachers worked, around the clock to try to support kids in their learning and in their emotional and mental health supports. But we need to make those investments now. We can't pretend that this past year wasn't absolutely destabilizing for children and youth. And so we didn't see that acknowledgement in the budget, and instead we saw $1 billion of cuts when we should have been investing in in mental health supports for every school and making sure that we had the extra resources there to support our kids, not only their learning, but other supports as well for their well-being. So that's, I think, a big problem. What we didn't see is the investment that we needed to clear the surgical backlogs as well. I mean, there's a lot of people still waiting in pain for surgery. People who have cancer literally spreading through their bodies because they can't get their surgeries done, screenings that have been postponed or canceled, other procedures. And from our read of the budget, it looks like far less than half of the necessary investment was included to expeditiously and get those things dealt with.
Okay, just on the let's have to go through this rather methodically here. On the education side, there was $1.6 billion in one-time funding for the education sector. Am I correct there? Right, 1.6 billion, but it was one-time funding, not 2 times or 3 times.
Sure.
So a lot of that funding is being withdrawn now. You think it's, what, too soon, or?
Well, I mean, absolutely. I think in the context of what kids and families have gone through in the last year, now's not the time to pull out the rug. Now's the time to make that extra investment, to provide that support for a little while longer until we are. We're sure that kids are back on their feet, and let's face it, we have schools closing as we speak. There are more schools closing in Ontario. The pandemic isn't over. The school year doesn't end till June. It's really quite, I think, shocking that the government's just basically saying, okay, we're done with all that. Education, is not on the agenda anymore, not important anymore, and that's not the case. And so, yeah, it's pretty shocking that this government just doesn't understand what families have gone through, what kids have gone through. They're just pretty out of touch in that regard.
Okay, so moving from education, let's go to long-term care, because you cited long-term care. The budget specifies $650 million for pandemic-specific relief. It also says it's going to cost almost $5 billion, about $4.9 billion over 4 years, to enact something that New Democrats have called for a long time, which is an average of 4 hours of care every day per resident, 4 hours of direct care. And the Ford government says it's going to commit $500 million of that money to be spent this year. What's your reaction to the long-term care finances?
There's a couple of things. First of all, I just want to clarify, we don't want an average of 4.1 hours of hands-on care. We want a guarantee that every single resident gets 4 hours of hands-on care. When you average it out, you're going to have what we have now, which is the people who have the highest acuity rates will get the most care, which is fine. They need a lot of care. But what ends up happening then is that folks who perhaps don't have such high acuity in terms of their conditions really get neglected. And that's not a system that's fair and that provides the dignity, the human touch, the quality of care, the attention that people deserve. And so it's not a matter of averages. It's a matter of guaranteeing every person. And what I have to say about the government's budget is that 4 years is too long. They should have started doing this work last year. Instead, we had a second wave worse than the first wave. And now third wave, and thank goodness they managed at least to vaccinate seniors in long-term care. But if you remember, there was supposed to be an iron ring, and there wasn't. And it turns out that the iron ring came a year too late, and 4,000 lives almost were lost. Totally unacceptable. So to say to these folks, you got to wait another 4 years. To say to PSWs, even though we pretend you're heroes, we're not going to guarantee that your wages are going to increase permanently. That's not in the budget. The idea that these workers should be working full-time jobs with decent careers, not having to cobble together a living working at 2 and 3 different places, not in the budget. So, no, I'm not happy at all with what the government has come up with, because it doesn't solve these are the very things that their own study last summer said that they should be doing. These are some of the initial recommendations from the Long-Term Care Commission, and the government simply didn't address them in the budget. And of course, the big enchilada is getting the profits out of long-term care, which of course this government has no interest in doing.
Okay, well, if that ever comes to pass, that's going to be that's going to have to be, as you know, that's going to have to be a long term.
Yeah, we did.
You can't do that overnight.
We did put a plan together for that. We announced it in the late fall, and it'll take 8 years. And it has to be done fairly. It has to be a fair transition that respects the workers and that appropriately provides compensation for those homes that we would be bringing back into the public or not-for-profit sector. But it can be want it to be done. So why not make that commitment in this budget? This is exactly the time to show people that things can be different, that there's hope, that we can actually fix the long-term care system. But with this plan, it's not going to happen.
Okay. By my reading, the overall budget just for health care is up by a little more than $3 billion in 1 year, from 66.7 to 69.8. There's an additional $1.8 billion for pandemic-related pressures for hospitals. And you mentioned the backlog in procedures, another $300 million there. What do you think of those figures?
Well, I mean, I think it's important that the government acknowledged that the hospital sector has been running in their own budget deficits for about a year. I mean, they've sounded the alarm bells with us a number of times as the official opposition to say they can't pay their bills. The government's not providing the money they need to provide the services that people should be getting in hospitals. And so the acknowledgement that there was a significant amount of money, the deficits that the hospitals were holding, was important for the government to acknowledge. Having said that, as I say, from what we understand, I mean, there's at the very minimum, there's 227,000 backlogged procedures and surgeries. That's a figure from months ago, though. So we don't even know. We can't even get an accurate figure of what that number is now. I don't even know if the government has it, but I can tell you that $300 million is nowhere near what's going to be necessary to expeditiously clear that backlog. And we know other provinces have done it. I mean, the other provinces started doing this work in the summer. I think of British Columbia, for example. I mean, they're going to have their entire backlog done by May, like in just a couple months' time. We're nowhere near that in Ontario. And in fact, the last time we did some calculations, it was going to take us a couple years to get through the backlog. That's just not acceptable. Okay. That's just not acceptable. So, right. So there needed to be more investment there and a real plan to deal with that backlog.
Okay. I thank you for your time this morning. Andrea
Absolutely,
Horwath.
my pleasure. Yeah. Can I say, Rob, we didn't get the paid sick days, and we didn't get paid off time for vaccinations either, which was another big disappointment.
Okay. We'll talk soon. Thank you.
All right, Rob.
Bye-bye.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
It's such a beautiful field because it's all natural. I'm able to talk to a lot of people who are going through different journeys of health where they really don't know where to start, where to begin. And I'm happy and grateful to have all this knowledge where I can actually help them and guide them. So, of course, medications have a great place in our system, but even so do down for centuries and centuries. Like, old time, ancient times, everything, herbs grew, everything was done with nature, all healing was done with nature. So I'm totally in love with all the elements with nature. In our beautiful village of Manotick, the Manotick Natural Market, you can find tremendous different things. So we have herbs, we have vitamins, we have natural body care, we do infrared sauna therapy, nutrition counseling, acupuncture, Bowen therapy, energy healing. So we're like a wellness hub along with being a full health food store. We are 1 year into pandemic since it started last year in March. It was a shock. Usually I see things coming, and I definitely did not see that coming. Golden Root is a product that I created 4 years ago, actually for my kids, just for immune system, overall health. And it just took off with certain friends of mine who had cancer or some severe issues, and they started finding that it was really helping them from different tests they had done with their doctor. And I knew I had something really special. So then I went through the proper procedure of being able to sell it. So it's actually, I'm not allowed to make it anymore in my house 4 years ago, and it is made in a Health Canada approved lab, and then it comes to me. And what Golden Root is a formulation of turmeric, ginger, lavender, oregano, and black pepper, all food grade, which is the most bioavailable turmeric in the market right now for pain, inflammation, digestion, immune system, concussion, liver health, and brain health. So, and it tastes like salad dressing. We do a lot of in-house, so we make our in-house concoctions of teas. You can come here, tell us what your health issues are, and we can blend it right there. And there's some that are already prepared beforehand for sleeping, for anxiety, for different things. And in that bar, we basically make cold brew teas and cold brew nitrogen. And again, it's all local. Everything we do is local, and as many herbs we can find locally as well. If a client can't come out, we'll go out our way to deliver it. And you're getting that personal touch when you come in. If you have an issue, we will listen. and help you. We're very, very active in the community, so we would like the same thing back for the community to come to.
He's the opinionated Ottawa icon.
The Rob Snow Show returns
On Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Okay, we have some breaking news by way of the Supreme Court of Canada. Our reporter Cormac McSweeney is in the lockup for the Supreme Court of Canada. And the decision is just out, as I said, just before 10 o'clock on the Trudeau carbon tax and the provincial challenge to the Trudeau carbon tax. And Cormac's tweeted about it. I haven't read his tweet. What does his tweet say, David?
Fresh out of the lockup, Cormac tweeting, the Supreme Court has ruled the federal carbon tax is constitutional. It's a split decision. The top court finds the federal government has jurisdiction to put a price on pollution.
A price on pollution, otherwise known as the carbon tax. Constitutional, there you go. All said and done. Over and done with. So, isn't that interesting? The two appeal courts in Saskatchewan and Ontario, they sided with the Trudeau government. The Court of Appeal sided with the provinces, went all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada, and it is now ruled that the carbon tax from the Trudeau government is constitutional. So we'll have the very latest on that and a full report from our parliamentary correspondent, Cormac McSweeney, here at City News coming up at 10 o'clock. Now, we still continue to gather reaction to the big spending Ontario budget yesterday. What does it mean for the city of Ottawa? Well, nobody's better connected when it comes to city issues than my good buddy, Pat Uguccioni. He is the managing editor of the Ottawa Community Voice newspapers. And welcome back. We're going to talk about the budget and a few more things. Good morning, Pat.
Good morning.
Getting back into the swing of things, right?
I am, yeah.
After your brief career as a political candidate.
My last
brief and last foray into municipal politics, but you know, you're back doing what you love. But it is a little bit different now because, you know, just the nature of what it's like to cover City Hall. I mean, it's just not the same, right? You can't kind of stop people in between meetings and have conversations with people in corridors and hallways and, you know, kind of get their thoughts on things. It's a little more difficult now to cover City Hall than it used to be.
Yeah, it is, but, you know, you just sort of work your sources from different angles for sure, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I miss those days, you know? Yeah.
I remember working for Larry O'Brien. They were hiding behind every pillar at City Hall. So.
Well, yeah, I mean, you get into work and the reporters are already lined up out the mayor's office, right? Wanting to know something.
And it's such a long hallway. There's nowhere to hide.
So, what do you take away from the provincial government in your opinion? How pleased or displeased should Mayor Watson be, do you think?
Well, there's not a lot of details of how it affects this city particularly, but I mean, there is money for municipalities for transit and to help with the the bare cupboard, so to speak. It's only $500 million. I don't know how spread across the province what Ottawa would get. So, they sprinkled a bit here and there, but nothing that I've read shows that it's going to fill the hole that Ottawa has.
Well, yeah, I mean, not the entire hole anyway. No. It kind of gets, it kind of gets them partway there, right. and maybe, maybe it serves as a message that there has to be some internal examination, and I mean some about spending at the city of Ottawa.
Well, I think it's probably why you saw the OC Transpo signal that there's some service adjustments coming or cuts, whatever you want to call it, coming in a report on Monday. So, yeah, I think the money from the province, they're probably holding it back until you show that you've looked at these yourself.
Yeah, but Pat, even on that, it's in the news that the hole left because of the plummeting ridership at OC Transpo is more than $100 million.
Yeah.
I mean, it's massive. Right?
Right.
I mean, isn't this just Band-Aid stuff that they're doing at OC Transpo? 70 jobs, 70 jobs through attrition, massaging the schedule, maybe eliminating some really low ridership routes to save $5.5 million? $5.5 million when your organization is bleeding more than $100 million a year? What's that?
Well, it's $11 million for the full year. Yeah, but yeah, that was the first thing I thought. I mean, if you believe they're bleeding $1 million a week, I mean, do the math. $11 million doesn't get you there. And the money from the province is $150 million for transit systems across the province. I don't know, per capita, we probably get about 13 to 15 million of that. So that certainly doesn't fill the hole. Earlier in the year, the GM, John Manconi, said that on top of, probably what they're going to announce next week, they're going to have to delay some projects, capital projects. So we'll see. I guess we'll see all the details on Monday.
Okay, yeah. And that's a special meeting, isn't it?
That's right. 2 weeks after the last one.
2 weeks after the last one.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. To me, and you're one of the few who's actually agreed with me on this, should have been done sooner.
Well, I think it's hard to argue it shouldn't have been done sooner. We all see the buses, and we're going over old ground here. But but I mean, the routes that they are cutting as of mid-June are these what they call connection buses. I think everyone kind of knows them as express buses that are sort of running sort of parallel to other services, or other routes. So that will be in the details.
Yeah, but it just seems to me, whether it's transit or housing, they have a plan to. The city really wants to build more affordable housing units. The goal is like 500 affordable housing units. But all of this, it's all contingent on them having a dance partner or dance partners by way of the federal government and the provincial government, some kind of cost-sharing arrangement. And
future phases of our LRT.
Exactly.
The city will have no share. They've said they will have no money for phase 3.
For phase 3, right? Yeah. So, but it just seems to me like this. There has to come a time when there has to be a serious examination. What can the city really do? Can it really do all of the things that it wants to do without a lot higher than a 3% property tax increase,
or putting more of a share of the cost of running OC Transpo on the taxpayer rather than the fare box, or
right? Sure, all of these things,
right?
All of these things. Okay, I know you've been putting some questions, and they're really good questions to Ottawa Public Health, and it's not about the residents being vaccinated in long-term care. But it's about the staff being vaccinated in long-term care, which is trailing the residents. The city's done a very good job at inoculating the residents of long-term care homes in the city of Ottawa. But what's when it comes to actually tracking staff and the progress of vaccinating staff working in long-term care homes in Ottawa, what have you been able to find out there?
Well, basically not much. To be honest with you, they haven't been tracking at the staff level as closely as the residents. I mean, the only numbers that I could get from Ottawa Public Health were that they've reached out to the long-term care centers in Ottawa, and there's 28, and they received information back from 23. And I think people should be concerned about the answer that only 58% of the employees in these long-term care centers have been vaccinated. You can only assume it's the same in the retirement homes, but they didn't have that information. And I've been told that if you look into the healthcare workers in hospital settings, it's not much better than that. So I don't know about you, but I think there's a moral obligation among healthcare workers that they should be getting these vaccinations, and it's it's a head scratcher as to why they're not.
But first of all, on the data collection itself, I mean, is it actually being tracked by some level of government?
Well, I think OPH would say that the provincial government should be doing it, and it's obviously not being done. So I mean, the OPH had to sort of almost do it, a paper trail.
Okay, if you're not doing it, we'll try our best, kind of thing.
Yeah, it seems that's what's going on. Yeah.
Okay, and is it based on what you've been able to find out, which apparently hasn't been much? I mean, is it an issue of say, a lack of supply of vaccine, or is it an issue of vaccine hesitancy, for example? What do you know?
I think it would probably be more the latter. I don't think the vaccine supply for healthcare settings like retirement homes and that is an issue. I think it's more the latter reason. I've been told they're going to go back into these long-term care centers and retirement home settings to try to figure out why there might be that hesitancy or why they're not getting the vaccines.
Right. So again, a very good job, an admirable job at vaccinating the residents of long-term care, but now it's time for a serious examination of, okay, what about the people working there? Right.
Yeah, we just heard yesterday that two healthcare or two staff at the PRD Clark Center in the PN has tested positive. So there's still outbreaks in these long-term care centers, even though the residents for the most part have been vaccinated. So obviously there's still a number of staff that haven't.
Okay, who do you have right now on your hypothetical ballot for mayor of Ottawa in the next municipal election?
Well, I think I would probably have the same names most people would be with the rumor mill, and I think they're all about if the present mayor Jim Watson doesn't run,
right?
And there's names like Yasser Naqvi, the former Liberal.
Oh, really? Okay.
He's talked to a lot of people, and and you heard last week that Bob Shirley is musing about it.
Yeah.
Diane Deans is musing about it.
Okay.
I've heard that Lisa MacLeod is poking around. She might be interested, but I think that these are all.
That's a pretty good. That would be.
Yeah.
All contingent on the future of Jim Watson, right?
I would say
there would be a thinning of the herd if he runs again, don't you think?
Certainly there would be nobody on this council. I don't think that would take him on unless Diane Deans did decide to take him on.
Yasser Naqvi, former McGuinty Wynne cabinet minister,
right?
Had some big jobs. Attorney General was one of them. Bob Shirley, been there, done that with him. Mm-hmm. Regional chair, mayor, cabinet minister. Still don't get his motivation to come back and.
Yeah, he's come off the mat a few times, but I'm sure he's used to being busy and he wants to be in.
To be in the game, I guess. But Diane Deans, I could certainly see her running.
It's an interesting.
Lisa MacLeod, I'm surprised though.
Just a name that I've heard in the rumor mill like everyone else.
In the rumor mill, okay. All right, thank you, Pat Uguccioni, for stirring the pot this morning. That's great stuff. We'll talk to you soon.
Great, take care.
Yeah, bye-bye. Pat Uguccioni, managing editor, Ottawa Community Voice Newspapers. Talkback hour coming up at 750-1310. Serious question for you people right after the news on City News.
is City News.
CIWW 1310 AM in Ottawa.
And CJET 1011 FM in Smiths Falls and the Valley. Number 1 for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 1011 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, March 25th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, 12 degrees. Here's what's making news in Ottawa and in the Valley. Well, breaking news in a landmark ruling, the Supreme Court of Canada has confirmed the federal carbon tax is constitutional. City News Parliament Hill reporter Cormac McSweeney was in the lockup this morning reading over that decision.
In a split 6-3 decision, our country's top court has ruled the Trudeau government's law setting a minimum price on carbon across the country is constitutionally sound in its entirety. The justices declare climate change is real, describing it as an existential challenge and threat to Canada and the world. They agree with the federal government that the price on pollution does meet the criteria of national concern, given emissions don't have borders, and that the failure of one province to address this matter will impact the ability of others to do so. The dissenting judges argue the feds are overstepping their jurisdiction, which is the case put forward by the provinces of Ontario, Alberta, and Saskatchewan, who launched legal challenges after the law was put in place in 2018. This ruling is a big victory for the Trudeau government and a blow to Conservatives provincially and federally who have long campaigned against the carbon tax. Cormac McSweeney, Parliament Hill.
City News Time, 10:02, and now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Well, varying amounts of sun and cloud today and a warm high, possibly record-setting high, 20 degrees today, a gusty southwest wind. For tonight, showers late this evening. We get into the steady rain overnight, the low near 8, and a wet, windy Friday, rain at times heavy, may even mix with snow Friday night. Tomorrow's high near 10. For today, the high, 20.
And right now in both Ottawa and Smiths Falls, it's 12 degrees. City News Time, 10:02. As part of the provincial budget investment in Ontario long-term care, the Pearly Rideau Veterans Health Centre will be expanding. MPP Mary Lee Fullerton said on Twitter the facility will be getting over 150 new units. She goes on to say that this investment will ensure our loved ones will have a safe, modern space to call home. Ottawa police investigating a property damage shooting yesterday and another gun-related incident in downtown, and more details are coming this morning. Police also have a portion of Renault Road closed to traffic once again today. Police were conducting an investigation along a stretch of the road between Anderson and Joshua yesterday afternoon, but suspended that at dark. It resumed this morning at light. Police say they will have more on these incidents coming up a little bit later on this morning. As a way to give folks a taste of live music before we can get back to in-person events, Ottawa Tourism and RBC Blues Fest teaming up to bring a concert series to 20 participating hotels in the capital. The series aims to boost the local tourism sector. It remains one of the hardest hit amid this pandemic. Here's City News reporter Alex Gouge.
The Room Service Concert Series will run over 8 nights between April 9th and 30th. Shows will be displayed only through televisions in participating hotel rooms. The lineup boasts musical and comedy acts including Alan Doyle, Colin James, Booker T, and Pete Davidson. Bluesfest Executive Director Mark Monahan tells me the lineup is in tune with the capital's taste in music.
Ottawa's appetite for music is very diverse, and we've got amazing music fans here.
He's also still holding out for an in-person Bluesfest this year and says a concrete announcement is coming next month. Head over to ottawa.citynews.ca for more information on the series. Alex Gouge, City News.
City News Time at 10:04. We're getting the new numbers in on COVID infections in Ontario today. Over 2,000 at 2,380 cases. We're waiting for more details from the province. We do know that 152 of these new cases are in Ottawa, 46 of them in the Eastern Ontario Health Unit. There are 17 new cases in Leeds and 4 in Renfrew. More details through the day on these latest COVID-19 infection numbers. I'm Andrew Boyle. For News Anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Talk back.
Hello. On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, Rob Snow Show continues.
Yeah, so we'll want to see the fine print on those COVID numbers. More than 2,000? 2,300? Is that what Andrew said, David? 2,300 cases?
And 80.
2,380.
Almost 2,400.
Wow. Holy smokes.
152 in Ottawa alone.
152 in Ottawa. Okay. So if there are any notes that will come along with that, Christine Elliott, the health minister, about data mistakes, or they include cases that were previously unreported from days or weeks ago, we'll let you know, because that's the biggest number in a long, long time. But that's not what I want to focus on right now. No, it is not. This is the Talkback Hour, and I have a serious question for you, okay? 750-1310. 750-1310, 613-750-1310. And I guess the theme for the hour is what I would call it generational fairness. I've seen that term used a few times in some very, very interesting opinion pieces in the news media this week. Generational fairness, okay? It's budget season. I talked a lot in the first hour about the Ontario budget, biggest spending budget ever. The Trudeau Liberals will offer up their spending plan next month, first budget in more than 2 years from the Trudeau Liberals. But we know what to expect. Big spending, record spending, massive deficits for a long, long time, a concerning national debt now north of $1 trillion. So my question for you really is this one. Is it wrong to stick the next generation with the bill for all of this pandemic-related spending? See, I think so, and I think we really need to talk about it. I know debt and deficit's not on the minds of a lot of people right now. It should be. It should be. Doesn't mean it's not important. And I think government should be coming up with plans now to deal with the bill, to start the process of getting these numbers back eventually to more rational levels. So we're not sticking it to the next generation. So we're not leaving them stuck paying the bill. And obviously, that means some things have to happen, just given the enormity of the task and the sheer size of the hole. Number one, taxes will have to go up. It's just a matter of what taxes. Consumption taxes like the GST. Taxes on the wealthy. Taxes will have to go up, and government programs will have to be cut. And then it's just a matter of picking and choosing what programs are going to be cut. But my question for you at 750-1310, 750-1310, 613-750-1310 is this. Are you willing to pay more tax and get less government services, fewer government programs, in order to make sure the next generations aren't stuck with the massive bill left over because of COVID-19? Don't you think that's the right and proper thing to do? Yes or no? And have your say right now at 750-1310, 750-1310. I mean, who should pay the tab? Are we really going to leave David's generation, David's children, David's grandchildren paying for all of this stuff? Is it really fair to leave the bill for all of the COVID spending to the next generations? And would you accept paying higher taxes, receiving less from government in order to reduce this burden of debt and deficit? I know debt and deficit not top of mind for a lot of Canadians right now. I get that. Everyone wants this wretched pandemic to be over. Everyone wants life to get back to normal. Believe me, I'm right there with you. But the cold, hard reality is the cupboard was pretty much bare before the pandemic started, and the cupboard is seriously empty now. And the bill is, I mean, it's staggering, folks. The bill is staggering, the bill that we have to pay back with interest because of all of this stuff. And remember, we have an Auditor General of Canada's report coming out this afternoon. Her team has been looking into programs like the wage subsidy and the CERB and how much was spent and how much was effectively spent. Okay. But is it really right to stick the next generation with the bill? Generational fairness. Generational fairness. It's all the talk in climate change circles. Why don't we apply the same thing to the nation's finances? When it comes to the conversations and the discussions and the debates about climate change, what do you hear? What do you hear? Well, what kind of planet do you want to leave the next generation? Don't you want to leave a cleaner, greener planet for the next generation? Do it for the next generation. Well, what about the nation's finances? Doesn't it apply as well? Generational fairness? Think about it for the moment. Think about the debt load that the next generation is going to be stuck with. Bloomberg News recently reported that Canada's debt load as a share of the economy is now greater than that of Greece. Okay, fiscally, we are in a worse position than Greece. And remember, Greece had to be bailed out by other countries, by the International Monetary Fund, World Bank, during the worst of the financial crisis, during the last Great Recession more than a decade ago. That's our starting point right now. We're worse than Greece. Or think about it another way. Let's take a typical Canadian family, okay? 2 spouses, 2 children. According to the debt clock at the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, the national debt of Canada is more than $1 trillion now. And each Canadian's share is $29,000. Let's call it $30,000. That means that our typical family of 4 in Canada share of the national debt is $120,000. Then there's the provincial debt. And in Ontario, that's closing in on $400 billion. It's one of the largest sub-sovereign debt loads in the world. And with this recent budget yesterday, Premier Ford has shown no interest in getting a handle on it. Each person in Ontario is on the hook for $27,000 worth of debt. So our typical family of 4, that's another $108,000. So we're up to $228,000 for our family of 4. Why don't let's call it $230,000. And then the city has a debt. The city of Ottawa is $2.7 billion in debt. In a city of 1 million people. So everyone in Ottawa is on the hook for $2,700. Our family of 4, almost $11,000. We're up to $240,000 for our family of 4. Our share of the debt of all 3 levels of government. Are we going to stick that onto the backs of the next generation? Is that really fair? And that doesn't even include all the other debts held by all the other government and quasi-government agencies. Are you willing to pay more in tax, get less in government services, in order to make sure the next generations aren't stuck with the bill for COVID-19? 750-1310, 750-1310, your calls after this on City News.
To opening a business especially in a pandemic, in that kind of situation, is very challenging. First, people don't know me, people don't know my product. To build a new clientele, to build a trust for them to show them that I care about it. I do love my food. That was the biggest challenge. And of course, in all lockdown, where I had to face it regards my employee, girls, ladies, what they work for me. I didn't want to tell them, sorry, I'm closed, I'm not having a job for you. No, they have families, they have kids to feed. So this is very important because we are family orientated. And we decided to open. We, of course, essential business. So been very tough, very, very tough, as we didn't see people on the road. Market was completely quiet, but we knew it that we have to wait, and we knew it that we're gonna be fine. In this town, we built online shop, Vedel Online, and we did Uber Eats, which one is picking up and is very, very popular. We have a really good feedback. So this is the song from my heart. And yeah, and we try to expand. I'm thinking about opening locations. So I want to make Vedel famous. I want to make the Vedel place to be for all the families with kids. Try the traditional food, what their grandparents cooked in the countries when they're from, or even Canadian people. They're more than welcome to come and try our famous pierogis. I try to be passionate about my food, organic food made with love, with all homemade, organic. So you can find food from all over the Europe: Polish, German, Ukrainian, Romanian, French, Armenian, so all kind of different types of food. Homemade lunches, we focus on the homemade lunches, grandma style. I keep always saying, like in my Genia Babcia house, how she cooked, I wanted this love and this food over here because I believe that would bring all people around me. And yeah, all the organic cold cuts, lovely selection of sausages, cheeses, European cheeses, great selections of mustards, French cookies. All what you need from Europe you can find here at the Vedel Touch of Europe. If you think good way, that's it. You have to, I had the option to cry in the corner and say, oh, pandemic is coming. No, you need to stand up and fight for it and have your eyes open, think outside of the box, and do it.
It's time to talk back
on the Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
So just on the COVID-19 numbers that were released just moments ago, which was close to 2,400. 2,400 for the province of Ontario, the daily case count, okay, that we report every day around this time. The Minister of Health says that's higher by about 280 cases because of data catch-up. So that still leaves today's number at more than 2,000, at about 2,100. Yesterday we're 1,570 or so. It's a one-day increase of like more than 500 cases. So, and what was the Ottawa number, David? It was more than 150 or so, something like that, right? Yeah.
152 in Ottawa.
Yeah, 152. Okay, but how much of that is data catch-up? We don't know. But nevertheless, it's more than 2,000 cases, people, more than 2,000 cases, okay, on the COVID case count. Now, what I'm asking today, it's budget season, it's debt season, it's deficit season. I'm thinking about generational fairness. And I'm asking, are you willing to pay? We have to get a handle on this situation. There's no doubt about it. No such thing as a free lunch. Are you willing to pay more in tax, get less in government programs to make sure that your children or grandchildren aren't stuck with this massive bill for COVID-19? 750-1310. 750-1310. Ellie. Good morning, Ellie.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm okay, Ellie. Thank you. Are you willing to pay more in tax, receive fewer, basically pay more for less if it means the next generation isn't stuck paying the bill for COVID-19?
Well, I would really hate to be in the government's shoes right now.
Okay.
Because no matter what they do, they're not doing it right.
Okay. All right.
Doesn't matter. But yes, I would pay a little more, but I'm not sure you can actually get rid of all the government services, because there are a lot of them that are very much needed for a lot of Canadians.
Well, sure. And about 60% of it has to be spent by law. Okay. GAS, OAS, transfers to provinces, funding for First Nations, all of this can't go anywhere, really. So.
You're right.
Yeah.
Now, what if, really off the wall idea, we did a GoFundMe page for the COVID.
GoFundMe. Okay. That'd be the mother of all GoFundMe pages.
It would be. But you know what? If you can raise $100,000 for simple little things.
Right.
Why couldn't we raise money for this?
Okay.
More than 1
look,
year.
it's not as outlandish as you think it is. And I'll outline some of the ideas that some of the actual experts are coming up with. But, you look at your pay stub, Ellie, the days of pay stubs when you would get your pay stub, right?
One.
And, you have deductions on your pay stub, right?
Yes.
CPP and EI and all the deductions that are on your pay stub. What if there was another one on there that said COVID debt payment? And for every worker in Ontario, every 2 weeks they're taking whatever it is, $5 off your paycheck. And it's going into a dedicated fund that's going to be used to pay down the debt that's been accumulated from all of this COVID spending. What would you think of something like that?
It would be an awesome idea. Everybody's contributing, and
right.
it works. But there has to be an end date.
Has to be an end date.
Once
okay,
the debt
sure.
is paid, then that...
And it has, if they're going to take $5 from me and they say they're going to use it to pay off the debt, I want it to be used to pay off the debt.
It has to
right? Not to be spent on whatever, magic bean government program Justin Trudeau or Doug Ford dream up the day after tomorrow.
It can't be the flavor of the week. It has to be dedicated. It has to be transparent. Yeah. But I think that would work very well.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, you too. Thank you for calling. I don't think she's called before. I haven't heard her voice before. Rick in Canada. Rick.
Yeah, Rob.
Higher taxes, less government programs, but you're not sticking the next generation with the bill for COVID. What do you think?
It's going to be higher taxes.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you remember the surtax. And Martin got rid of that in 1997, but every paycheck, in addition to income tax, had a surtax on it based on the income you brought in. So we could see something like that at the federal level to help offset this debt.
Yeah, well, actually, there's a think piece in the news media this week from two former senior Department of Finance people that probably worked in the Martin Department of Finance, and that's what they're pitching is surtaxes.
Yeah, so basically bringing it back again,
mm-hmm.
and unfortunately,
not it, sir, taxes, plural.
Completely agree. Yeah, absolutely, sir.
Right,
and I could see that coming back again. The only thing that concerns me is, remember, we have the hydro debt retirement.
Oh yeah,
charge.
I looked it up this morning. I looked up. Did you know, for example, Hydro Ottawa is owned by the taxpayers of Ottawa, right? It's 100% owned by the city.
Yeah.
You know what the debt load is for Hydro Ottawa? I'll tell you. It's $2.1 billion. Wow.
Again, you know what amazes me about that? Somehow they managed to give the city of Ottawa a $4 to $5 million special dividend.
Yeah, $2.1 billion.
Every year. Yeah,
now, that for our typical family of four, that's $8,400 for every family of four.
So question, how well do these debt retirement charges or special, in this case, a COVID-19 charge, how well do they work out? The government seems to get around to spending that too.
Yeah. Okay. All right, Rick. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good to hear from you. Again, we're talking about the massive bill. It may be anywhere from $250 billion to $500 billion in new debt accumulated as a result of the response to COVID-19. Who's going to pick up the tab for that? Two things have to happen. You have to have higher taxes, and you have to accept that your higher taxes are going to result in fewer government programs. Or you just stick it to the next generation. They've already been called Generation Squeezed and Generation Screwed and everything else. Just, squeeze them and screw them some more, I guess. Ontario Power Generation's almost $20 billion in debt. We're already to the point now, for a family of 4 in Ottawa, in government debt and quasi-government debt, the starting point now is about $250,000 in government and quasi-government debt. Well, so what is to be done about this? What is to be done about this? Because when it comes to this government debt binge, there's never been anything like it. I mean, it rivals our wartime spending. Is it really fair to the next generation, heck, the next generations, to stick them with the bill for all of this? 750-1310, 750-1310. Rob Snow Show, Talkback Hour. Sandy, Carlton Place, good morning.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm okay. What do you think?
My only concern is I have a question. How much of all these billions of dollars been spent on seniors? Has any of them collected CERB? All the people that are under 60 have worked all their lives, and now, because the younger generation are getting the CERB, they're all getting bailed out. And again, the government, of course, will come after the seniors because they're the ones that have the properties, and they're going to tax them. We're only getting...
Well, in fact, there's lots of speculation, Sandy, if I could just jump in there. There's lots of speculation that, and even recommendations, that if the government wants to raise some cash, one thing the government should do is kind of slay that sacred cow and put a capital gains tax on the sale of your principal residence, sir. Don't think they're not thinking about it.
Oh, I know they're thinking about that. That's what I'm saying. So the younger generation, I'm talking not seniors, but
right,
the people that have got all these programs, all these billions and billions of dollars. What percentage do you think were given to seniors during this time?
Well, certainly I think what was given to, say, students and university students probably more than what was ever given to seniors, sir. Yeah. But a 20, 25-year-old who got a few checks, a 20, 25-year-old who got a few checks for $2,000 isn't sitting on a $500,000 house or $1 million house, Sandy. Unlike a lot of seniors.
The person that owns that $1 million house worked their life.
Sure.
I probably had a business, worked 80, 90
and there are lots of young people who are, 25, 30 years old. They'd love nothing more than to buy a house, but they're just priced out of the market, sir. They'll never be able to buy a house now. It's one of the great dilemmas. But anyway, we're kind of talking in circles. Are you willing to pay higher taxes and get fewer government services in order to make sure the younger generation is not stuck footing the bill for COVID-19? Because it sounds to me like, Sandy, you're saying screw them.
I'm actually saying that personally, as a senior, the answer is no.
All right, the answer is no. Okay, some tough love. Gotcha, Sandy. Some tough love from Grandpa. All right, we're back after the news. Rob Snow Show on City News.
1 for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, March 25th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, 12 degrees, 14 in Smiths Falls. Here's what's making news this hour. A dramatic hike in the case count of COVID-19 in our province today. It has been around the 1,500 mark for the past few days, but has now jumped to 2,380 new cases today. It's the first time in over a month the case count has been this high. 152 of the new cases are in Ottawa. There are 17 more in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark, 46 in the Eastern Ontario Health Unit, and 4 more cases in Renfrew. 1,016 of the new cases are in Toronto. Health Minister Christine Elliott does tweet today the case count is higher by about 280 due to a data catch-up process related to the provincial system. There are also 17 more deaths being reported from COVID in Ontario today. Supreme Court of Canada says the federal carbon price is entirely constitutional. A split decision upholds a pivotal part of the Liberal climate change plan, accounting for at least 1/3 of the emissions Canada aims to cut over the next decade. Chief Justice Richard Wagner says in a written ruling the climate change is real and an existential threat to Canada and the entire world. If you are being asked now to avoid Renault Road, police are continuing an investigation there. Police say they will release more information likely later this morning, but for now, you're asked to avoid the area of Renault Road between Anderson and Joshua. City News Time, 10:32. I'm Andrew Boyle. For News Anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Talk back.
Hello. On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
Is it really fair to stick the next generation, or the next generations, with the big fat bill for all of this COVID-19 spending? I mean, think about what you're hearing, for example, from the Trudeau Liberals, and let's face it, the Ford Progressive Conservatives, they sound a lot like Trudeau Liberals these days. Think about the demands from the Trudeau Liberals, the demands from the progressive left on the Trudeau Liberals. Okay, spend more on take your pick, on universal everything, on pharmacare, childcare, basic income, free university, forgive student loan debt. I mean, the wish list is endless. And we know the Trudeau Liberals, they're not shy about spending money, borrowed money. And there's no desire to slow things down at all. Whatever they've spent so far, the forecast is, the prediction is, there's going to be another $100 billion made available in the next federal budget for all sorts of pet projects, right? With a heavy emphasis on anything that happens to be even the faintest shade of green. $400 billion deficit, trillion dollar debt, provincially $400 billion debt. Well, what do these numbers look like by the middle of this decade, by the end of this decade, when a 20-year-old is 30 years old, wants to get married, have some children, maybe buy a house someday, maybe sometime long off in the future, have a great career and retire with a nest egg and a little bit of dignity. So is it really right to crush them with all of this debt? Stick that 20-year-old today with this bill? Hand it over to them and their children? See, politicians, they don't look past the next election. For Trudeau, probably not thinking much past June. For Premier Ford, June of next year. Clearly, the last thing on their minds right now is turning off the taps. They're all Keynesian now. But we have seen, ladies and gentlemen, in this city, may I remind you, we have seen this party end before, and it doesn't have a happy ending when the music stops. And the music stopped in the mid-90s. And it was a difficult time in the mid-90s, particularly in Ottawa, when Jean Chrétien and Paul Martin were cutting everything. 7,000 people gone from the CBC. Bureaus closed all across the country. Tens of thousands, north of 50,000 public sector workers were let go in the mid-90s. It was a culling. And what costs they couldn't cut, they downloaded onto the provinces, onto governments like Mike Harris's government here in Ontario. And then those governments responded in kind by doing what? They downloaded costs onto municipalities. Because there's no free lunch. There's no free lunch, but despite the pandemic, we've still been eating pretty well. But you all know the server is eventually going to bring you the bill, and you can't dine and dash. So I'm asking you this morning here on the Talkback Hour, will you accept higher taxes and fewer government programs? Not more government programs, fewer government programs. Pay more, get less to get a handle on this debt and deficit situation so it is not that crushing burden for the next generation. 750-1310, 750-1310. Andrew, thank you for waiting. Go ahead. Andrew. Oh, sorry. There we go. Yep.
Yeah, I was just listening to your show, and I think you're answering your own question there in the last just a few comments that you made, that they've got intentions of spending like drunken sailors going. So why would I be inclined to cover their debt? We never get a chance to have a say in what they're spending. They just spend, and we have no say whatsoever. If he wants to turn around and say, I'm going to take out $50 billion and spend it, we have no opportunity to say no.
Well, I asked the question because I want to gauge the political appetite for such a thing.
Yeah, no,
I think public sentiment
around the edges here, right? Because you're talking about numbers that are stratospherically high.
Right.
Like I said to Dave before the show, I said, that's like me owing the bank $10 million and I'm earning $100,000 a year. It's never going to be paid back. Never. Like, we got to get that clear. So given that.
So why even bother? Why even bother?
There's only one solution. There's only one way out of this, and this guy's been talking about it forever with the Build Back Better thing, right? Like, that's the only solution. And if we don't go down that road,
what do you mean? What do you mean Build Back Better? What do you mean Build Back Better?
Well, that's the big criteria under Build Back Better is default on the debt. That's one of the major starting points of getting this Build Back Better going. You default on your debt.
Oh, you default on debt. Okay.
Outside of that, there's no way we're going to be able to pay this back. And like you say, he keeps spending like a drunken sailor with half the people out of work because of COVID. Like, it's as plain as the nose on your face. We're doomed.
We're doomed. Okay. Just accept it. Just accept it. Okay. Okay.
I think
bathe in the apathy, Andrew. Bathe in the apathy. Okay.
I think the government should look internally. Like, they should go in there and they should slash and burn. Like, that's coming from a libertarian practically. I'm so far right. But
okay. All right.
I'm not a big fan of government, but they spend and they spend and they just don't seem to understand. We went through this in the 80s. We went through this in the 90s, and here we are in the 2000s, and as we're right back to square one. Spending. Oh, can you bail out of debt? And it's like, no. No.
Right. Okay, Andrew. Thank you. Yeah, well done. Yeah. Been a few what I would call think pieces about this in the news media this week. One is from C. Scott Clark and Peter C. DeVries. They are both in the Federal Department of Finance, some pretty heavy hitters. And to one of our Ellie's point, Ellie called earlier in the program, what they note is that a lot of government spending at the federal level, you just can't get rid of it. I mean, it is statutory in nature. I suppose you could change your statutes, but really what it means is it's baked in. You have no choice. You have to spend it. Health transfers, Social Security payments, equalization, funding for First Nations. You really can't touch the stuff, and it accounts for about 60% of all the government spending at the federal level. So what they are floating, to Rick's point, is special surtaxes. Taxes that are supposed to be temporary, right? A surtax. Taxes on top of whatever you're paying in tax now. Like a general surtax is one of the ideas. And you call it the COVID tax. You call it the COVID tax, right? CDT, COVID debt tax. A wealth surtax, right? The NDP is always calling for, tax the rich. Tax the rich until they're as poor as I am. Surtax on corporate profits, right? Whatever corporate profits are taxed at now, put another tax on them. A banking surtax, a special tax just for the banks. Stick it to the banks. Or another option is raising the GST back up to 7%. Remember Harper and Flaherty, they promised they'd lower the GST. Not like Chrétien, who said he would eliminate it and then did no such thing. But Harper lowered it to 5%. You got to put it back up to 7%. That's what they say you do. And you do this, okay? Whatever revenue is raised from these taxes, you put them aside in a special fund just to pay off whatever debt was accumulated to deal with the pandemic, okay? You can't go using it to chase your magic bean programs, okay? They suggest that if you did that and the Canadian economy grows at about 2.5% a year, you might be able to pay off this COVID debt in 5 years. And the next generation isn't stuck footing the bill. It's one idea that's out there, okay? But I'm just encouraged that some people are actually talking about it. Betty in Ottawa. Good morning, Betty.
Good morning.
Hi, Betty.
I'm calling to object to capital gains tax on property. Seniors have worked too hard for what they've got, and I think that'd be a disaster.
Well, they're talking about it, ma'am.
I know they are, and no matter what you give them, they're going to spend it on. Trudeau doesn't stop spending regardless of what he gets. But I think a good answer is to start taxing winnings.
Winnings, like lottery winnings. Lottery winnings.
Lottery winnings.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're not, we don't expect this. If I won it, I'd gladly pay tax on it.
Right. Well, and they from what I understand, not having won the lottery, Betty, or, I wouldn't be talking to you, quite honestly. But in the United States, they pay tax on the lottery winnings.
Exactly.
Right? So, yeah, and if you go on a game show and you win something, you got to pay tax on it.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
This is not something you worked hard for. It's something that fell in your lap.
Right. It's a windfall.
And you shouldn't mind paying tax on that.
No.
And leave the rest of us alone because he's going to spend whatever he can get. It's clear the debt.
Yeah, Betty, it's not just him. It's Doug Ford is spending all kinds of money, too.
Well, I think
Doug
Doug Ford is trying to look out for the little guy right now.
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, I think Doug Ford's doing a good job.
You do?
I never thought Trudeau was, but anyway.
All right, Betty. Okay. Tax the lottery and keep your hands off my house, you're saying.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
What they're going to do anyway is raise the appraisal value, so he's going to collect a lot more tax there anyhow.
Okay. Thank you, Betty. Thank you. Yep, good idea. Good idea. We actually have an economist coming on from the Royal Bank, and I will ask him about this idea of a capital gains tax on principal residence, which is kind of a sacred cow in political Ottawa. You don't tax the principal residence for the capital gains tax. Maybe we're about to slay that sacred cow. Karen in Stittsville. Karen.
Hi,
Karen.
I'm just wondering, you know how they're saying in the budget, Trudeau wants to bring in a basic income tax,
basic universal income, yeah.
So where is that money coming from, too? I just want to know
where do you think it's coming from, Karen? Where do you think it would come?
I'm just saying, he never says where the money is coming from for any of this. Like, all this money he's spending, he never gives us
Sure. Okay. I don't want to lose focus. My focus is, Karen, do you have kids and grandkids?
I do. I have 4 kids and nearly 4 grandchildren.
Right. Aren't you worried about all this debt that we're accumulating here?
I am, and the thing about it is, once I was at a store. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm right here. Yeah.
And I was at one of the restaurants, and they were on TV giving the money away again. And I asked the young guy working there where the money's coming from, and he said the government. I said, no, who's the government? He said the government. Young people and a lot of people do not realize that they have to pay this money back.
Well,
They think Trudeau is
they're in
giving
for a
it
rude
away,
awakening. I mean, they're in for a rude awakening. I mean, that's all there is to it.
They think it's free. You
Right.
know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah.
And everything's going up because now there's another tax for the water. If you, I just heard about it. Like it's another tax for the city to get that you have to pay $150, and if your sewer line bursts and you don't take it, you can spend up to $16,000. So they're all.
Oh, well, this is an insurance product that's being offered. Yeah, sewer line
but
insurance.
I'm saying that, but really, they're trying to get more money somehow.
Right.
So Trudeau
Okay.
is going to.
Yeah. What I want to get at, Karen,
Yes.
you're very worried about the finances, right, of the nation.
I am.
Right.
Like
Well, would you pay more tax, Karen? Would you pay more tax?
If I knew it was exactly going to, like you said earlier, they showed proof that it was going to pay the debt back. Because, because when they get the carbon tax, that's not going back to the environment. I mean, that's going back to people. So he's not even doing the environment. It's just hot air. It's full of hot air.
Full of hot air. Okay. Thank you, Karen. Thank you. Be right back. Final quarter. Talk Back Hour. Rob Snow Show on City News.
This affected us big time because when, you know how we are seasoned, we have clothes for the spring, clothes for the winter. That time, lots of clothes didn't arrive on time from Europe or from here because some factory shut down. So, and this put us in an odd position. We received not all the merchandise, part of the merchandise, and people. And for us, we have to be careful, you know, especially with the virus going on. Like, did affect the business, of course, like everybody else. We're not immune, and since the government helped, you know, this did a little bit good for us too, but still affected all the sectors, especially clothing. You know, you can see big corporation affected bad because nobody was thought it's gonna be like this. You know, earthquake might happen. We joke about it before. Think it might happen, but this was like a third war, but with a virus. So how to survive? That's the question, and we're doing our best to work with the mall, especially rent in a mall is very high. The government, they have certain, let's say, condition, like how many people will be in the mall or in the stores, etc. Yeah, it's a big factor, but of course, if my store has a back doors or just will be better, it will be much better. At least we can have curbside much easy because we have to shut down completely, you know? And this left a mark on us, on everybody too. People always ask me, go online. Certain things you can't go online, let's say t-shirt, certain product people not fit. But when it comes to clothing, like it's different completely. Let's say I have a customer comes, you can give him 44, but certain suit he might take 42, certain suit he might take 46. So, and how could, I mean, suit is not gonna fit the same. And I see people come back and they show me what they got online and not the same fabric. Mostly young people, but if you really want to shop, you have to go to the store because everything will be around you. You want to be sure the color look good, the fit will look good, especially when you spend, doesn't matter how much money, 300 or 2,000, you know? You have to try, you have to see what's going on. Please don't be shy, contact us. It will be a pleasure for me to take a suit or coat or anything. Like sometimes people have a funeral, or they have things, they have a wedding, they don't want to come to the mall. If I get all the information, I will go and meet them at their home or their business offices. I'm gonna start doing that, you know, and this will help the business and help the people. Like they're afraid to come to the mall for time being, or they're too busy at work. They cannot go anywhere at a certain time, so I'm glad to do that.
It's time to talk back.
On the Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
You're willing to stick the next generation with the bill for the COVID-19 pandemic? Or would you pay more tax, accept less in government services to make sure the next generation isn't stuck with that massive bill for COVID-19? It's been a hot topic this morning. David, Smith Falls. David, how do you answer that question, David?
wage. Let's have a maximum wage. So everyone that's sucking off the Ontario teat, we have a maximum wage, say $250,000. So I don't care if you're in Hydro 1, OPG, an MPP, anything. That's your maximum salary.
That's it. That's all.
Pardon me?
If you're working from the government, you're not allowed to make any more than $250,000.
Well, if you're making $250,000, Rob, are you doing all right?
You're doing all right. Sure.
Living in a nice home.
Yeah.
Are you worried about paying your next hydro bill?
Probably not. No, probably not. No.
So that's it.
You think that's good enough?
I hate the fact that we have a salary minimum.
Salary caps. Salary cap is what you're talking about, right?
For everyone who's sucking off the Ontario.
Okay. All right. Okay. Just the Ontario government, sir? What about the federal government? All those people working for all those crown corporations. Should we go after them too? They're a lost cause. They're a lost cause.
You know what? I'm a white, middle-aged male. I cannot work for them because I'm a white, middle-aged male.
Well, whatever. I don't want to go down that road of identity politics with you, sir. But nevertheless, what I want to get into is, do you have kids, grandkids, whatever?
Kids and grandkids.
Kids and grandkids. Yeah. Aren't you worried about leaving them at this huge debt and deficit?
I've been saying this for 10 years, and I show people the debt clock online. I don't know if you're familiar with the debt clock.
I looked it up this morning, sir, at the Canadian Taxpayers Federation.
I look it up once a week, and it just depresses me and makes me sad.
Yeah, it's very depressing. Yeah, we should stop doing that probably then, David. If it depresses us so much, right? But would you pay higher taxes? You'd be willing to pay a higher tax? A special COVID tax, for example, if it went specifically to pay down the debt associated with all the spending of the last year?
Every time there's about to be an election and a politician comes to my front door, my first question to them is, what are you doing to lower my taxes?
Lower taxes, okay.
I'm not spending all this money.
No.
Why am I paying for it?
Right, okay. All right, David, I'll put you down as a big fat no. And that's A-OK with me. Look, we had a guy on from the University of Calgary the other day, John Lester, just authored a report for the C.D. Howe Institute. And it was all about this. How are we going to pay the bill for this COVID-19 spending spree, right? Well, let's keep Justin Trudeau away from the front steps of Rideau Cottage, first of all. That's one thing we can do. But he argues in that report that the debt has probably increased by about $550 billion. $550 billion. Can you imagine it? Because of the pandemic. And he says that we should do our best to pay most of that off over the next 18 to 25 years. When, quote unquote, the next generation starts working and paying taxes. And he says go after business subsidies. Stop giving Bombardier all that money or the Ford Motor Company all that money, right? Stop subsidizing businesses. Eliminate subsidies. And you're going to have some rationalization in government spending. It's unavoidable. And that if you're going to raise taxes, raise consumption taxes like the GST before you go after corporate taxes or income taxes. But this is the whole idea. It's a question of generational fairness. Is it really fair to leave someone born this year with a massive bill 20 years from now because, well, we wanted to get through the pandemic with as little pain as possible. We wanted to give 15-year-olds $2,000 a month. Like I said, you gotta, you think about it in terms of the way the climate warriors frame the discussion about climate change. Crisis, emergency. Do it for the next generation. Do it for Greta. Greta's there and she's on television. She's speaking to the United States. And what is she saying? You're robbing me of my future. Well, why doesn't that apply to the fiscal position of the government? You're robbing them of their future. If you won't do it for yourself, do it for your children and your grandchildren. And think of the kind of balance sheet that you want them to inherit. Sure, it'll mean higher taxes. It will mean the government can't be all things to all people. Yes, it would mean we all pay more and get less. But maybe, just maybe, our children and grandchildren would thank us for it. Oh, look who's on the line. this still brings a tear to my eye. Bernie.
Yes, sir.
Hello, comrade. What's up, buddy?
Nothing. It's a good subject you got on today, but I think the answer is 5% tax on the super rich.
Sure.
3 million people in Canada, including the billionaires, owe $10 trillion. 5% tax and wipe out all this COVID spending. And till the people realize that, never mind about the future generations or this generation or anything, we got to face the fact that the elephant in the room is the rich, and they got to be taxed.
Stick it to the rich. Stick it to the rich.
Right.
Stick it to the rich. It's very popular because, let's face it, Bernie, most of us aren't rich. Dean in Ashton. Good morning, Dean.
Morning, Rob. How you doing?
I'm good, sir. Thank you. Are you willing to pay higher taxes?
Well, yeah, you know what? Boils down to it that I got
accept
kids.
fewer government services so you don't stick it to your children and grandchildren, sir, and leave them with this big bill.
Yeah, I got 2 kids, and they'll probably eventually have kids too, and I'm worried about them going down the road and paying this off. But there's no accountability whatsoever in the federal government, especially with Trudeau. I mean, I would be willing to pay a tax to actually get rid of Trudeau. This guy is out of control. Has been before COVID and will be after COVID.
Okay. All right. Pay a tax. You pay a tax to get rid of Trudeau.
Absolutely.
Okay. The Trudeau goodbye tax or something like that.
You got that right.
Okay. All right. All right. That's the funniest thing I've heard in a while. Thank you, Dean. Thank you. Thank you for all your calls this morning. I got a great hour coming up after the news at 11 o'clock. Beth Potter is the president and CEO of the Tourism Industry Association of Canada, which is also a member of a new coalition. It's called the Coalition of Hardest Hit Businesses, a coalition of all these industries. They were the first to close, and they're going to be the last to open. And what do they want? What do they need right now at this point in time? And Robert Hogue is a senior economist with RBC Economics, Royal Bank of Canada, out with a new report that says the housing market of Canada is too hot and the government needs to do something about it. We'll be right back after the news here on City News.
This is City News.
CIWW 1310 AM in Ottawa.
And CJET 1011 FM in Smiths Falls and the Valley. Number 1 for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, March 25th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, 12 degrees, in Smiths Falls, 14. And here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. It is a dramatic hike in the case count of COVID in our province today. What had been around the 1,500 mark for the past few days has now jumped to 2,380 new cases. First time since early February the case count has been this high. 152 of the new cases are in Ottawa, 17 in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark, although that health unit says their number is actually 14. There are 46 in the Eastern Ontario Health Unit and 4 in Renfrew. Again, these numbers according to the province. 1,016 of the cases are in Toronto. Now, Health Minister Christine Elliott did tweet today the case count is higher by about 280 due to a data catch-up process related to the provincial system. The province is also reporting 17 more deaths today from COVID-19. City News Time, 11:01, and now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
We'll have varying amounts of sun and cloud today and a warm high, possibly record-setting high, 20 degrees today, a gusty southwest wind. For tonight, showers late this evening. We get into the steady rain overnight, the low near 8, and a wet, windy Friday, rain at times heavy, may even mix with snow Friday night. Tomorrow's high near 10. For today, the high, 20.
And right now in Ottawa, it's 12 degrees, and in Smiths Falls, it's 14. Well, breaking news from the top court in the land that has delivered its verdict on the federal government's carbon tax, finding it is constitutional. Here is City News Parliament Hill reporter Cormac McSweeney.
The Supreme Court issued its split decision to uphold the price on pollution, the centerpiece of the Trudeau government's climate change strategy. The majority of judges issued a clear ruling saying climate change is real and a threat to Canada and the world. And this issue is of national concern because emissions have no borders, and the failure of one province to address this will impact the ability of others to do so. 3 of the 9 judges dissented and sided with the provinces of Ontario, Alberta, and Saskatchewan, who launched the legal challenges against the carbon tax, claiming it infringes on their provincial powers over taxation and natural resources. Politically, this will be seen as a major victory for the Trudeau government and a big blow to federal and provincial Conservatives who've long opposed the price on pollution. Cormac McSweeney, Parliament Hill.
City News Time, 11:03. Canada's COVID-19 vaccine rollout has surpassed a double-digit milestone. Canadian Press reporter Adam Burns with more.
11% of the country's adult population is now at least partially protected from the virus. Canada's Deputy Chief Public Health Officer says more than 4.3 million doses of vaccines have been administered in Canada, but Dr. Howard New says that's not enough to stop the spread of the virus, and more transmissible variants continue to pose a significant threat.
Now, New says 60% of Canadians over the age of 80 and 19% of those in their 70s have received at least one dose of vaccine. 3 days after he was led away in handcuffs from a Boulder supermarket in Colorado where 10 people were fatally shot, the suspect has appeared in court for the first time. His defense lawyer has asked for a mental health assessment to address his, quote, mental illness. The lawyer for the suspect provided no other details on what he might suffer from. During a brief hearing, the suspect appeared in court wearing a mask. He didn't speak other than to say yes to a question from the judge and did not enter a plea to the charges. He does remain held without bail on 10 charges of first-degree murder. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Strong voice.
Strong opinions.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Are you thinking about fleeing the city, getting away from it all? Settling in, small town life, country life, rural life, remote living? What do you need to know? What's different from life in the big city? Well, we have a great guest on the line. Eugene McDonald is the president of the Kawartha Lakes Real Estate Association. Good morning, Mr. McDonald.
Good morning.
Yeah, it's very nice to hear from you. So Kawartha Lakes, you're about 90 minutes away from Toronto, I guess, something like that.
About 90 minutes northeast of Toronto.
Northeast of Toronto, right? Bob Cajun would be a familiar
that's
name,
here,
right?
Lindsay.
Yeah. Let me ask you, are people fleeing the big city? Are you experiencing a booming real estate market in a place like Kawartha Lakes?
Our market is up noticeably. People are leaving the Toronto area and a couple of other areas down south and moving this way. We've seen this happening over the last few years, but it's gotten more intense this year. Previously, it was mostly retirees coming up here for a quieter, gentler life.
Yes.
But now we're seeing a lot of young families come this way as well.
Right. Young families who can probably either, they can work from home now, I guess, right? Now the remote work has kind of taken off as a thing, right?
Yeah, that's one of the considerations for sure. The other one is just space for them, like being cooped up in a 700 to 1,000 square foot condo just didn't work with 2 or 3 kids.
Right. Is it affordable? Kawartha Lakes? Or is it getting up there?
We're in February. Our average home price was $528,700.
Okay.
And that's for a single family detached home. Compare it with Toronto, where it's over $1 million. Yeah, it's pretty affordable.
Yeah. It's a bargain by comparison, isn't it? It's a bargain by comparison. So fleeing the big city, what would you say are some of the big differences? Say from living in the GTA to living in a place like one of the communities that make up Kawartha Lakes.
It depends on where exactly you move up here.
Okay.
Within Lindsay, Bob Cajun, Fenland Falls, the other couple of urban areas we have, there's not a lot of difference in the services or facilities that are available.
Okay.
But if you're moving outside of those areas, people have to deal with things like wells, septic systems, sometimes different types of right-of-ways, different zoning.
Such as, what do you mean on right-of-ways, for example?
Well, if you buy something that's on a private road, you may have a right-of-way that goes across your property, like something that someone has the right to use to get to their property, depending on how it's structured and where it's at.
Ah, I see. Okay, yeah. But as you mentioned, another one is just the lack of city services, right?
In some areas, yes.
Right. Like, I mean, the big ones being water and sewer. You're going to be on your own for those, if you're in a more rural area. Right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. What about, this is a big one, and I think governments are awakening to it, and certainly it's something that we've talked about a lot on this program, is the internet experience.
Internet in the urban areas is good. It's very good, actually, in most of them. I personally have a choice of 3 or 4 different companies that provide it, including Bell and Rogers.
Right.
And that's the same for most of the urban areas here. The rural areas are not quite there yet in some spots. Some areas are quite good, some aren't. We're seeing an expansion of these services, though, and it's getting better. It's definitely much better than it was a couple of years ago.
Yeah. I do wonder if it's, is it causing friction in any way or tension? People who have lived in areas where you would deal with, who have lived there for a long time or maybe generations, now seeing this influx of people, I wonder if it's maybe upsetting things a little bit. What's your sense of it, Mr. McDonald?
Don't really.
These out-of-towners, what are they flooding the place? This kind of.
And flooding the place is maybe the wrong term. I mean, like, we're a relatively small board with a relatively small area. Our sales last month were 120 units or something like that.
Okay, all right.
The whole board. So we're probably looking at 40, maybe 50% of those are coming from away. And that's almost a Newfoundland term, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is, yeah.
But integration with the communities is usually good. Usually they bring things that, in some ways, the community may be lacking, like the diversity and stuff like that. And it's been good for the schools, and it's been good for the communities.
Right. So some of the local municipalities are welcoming the kind of the influx, potential economic development, tax revenue, these kinds of things, right?
All of the communities up here, the whole of Kawartha Lakes, the city of Kawartha Lakes, which includes the whole area, is very welcoming to people coming here, and will make the city has several programs in place to help people move in and get adjusted and get ready.
Yeah. Is it difficult to make that adjustment, do you think, or do people pretty much settle in pretty well?
A lot depends on the person, and a lot depends on why they're moving.
Okay.
If you're moving just to escape being tied up in a box in Toronto, then when you may miss some of the stuff that goes with that. If you're moving because you want a better life for your family, or you want to retire in a slightly slower paced, quieter environment, then the adjustment is virtually nil. Like you just move it and you love it.
Yeah. Well, any having the bidding wars?
Yeah, we're seeing
you are. Okay.
Multiple offers on most properties.
Right. Well, Mr. McDonald, it sounds lovely. I'd love to come and see it sometime. Kawartha Lakes sounds great.
There's, lots of, and the other thing that's up here is available, although not many are available right now, but lots of rentals, cottages.
Oh, really? Okay.
We have hundreds of lakes in this area, and just beautiful place to live.
And they're not all spoken for yet, you're saying?
Not all of them, no.
Okay.
A couple that are okay.
Thank you, Eugene McDonald. All the best to you, sir.
Same to you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Kawartha Lakes Real Estate Association. We'll be right back with Beth Potter, President and CEO, Tourism Association of Canada, a member of the Coalition of Hardest Hit Businesses, calling on the federal government to extend business support programs past the current deadline, which is June 5th. This is The Rob Snow Show on Rogers TV and City News.
Part of the reason I got back into this is because I am creative, and I also wanted to kind of have a fun flair, 50s vibe. All of the boxes are kind of fun names, the colors are fun, the logo is fun, and it's not just the package that I want to bring joy to people's lives, it's also the feeling that they get when they receive it, to know that there's someone that thinks of them and they're missing them, and showing that they care when they can't be there. The smallest of the subscription boxes is the red box, the classical box. So you would get 5 to 7 items from the variety of categories. Those do change quarterly. However, with items that are more popular, we'll bring them back as people ask for them, or you could get them as an add-on option. And then those items will be included in the Jazzy box, the same items from the first, although they'll be in a larger size, more quantity, as well as a couple extra items. And then in the largest box, the Doo-Wop Deluxe, which is our most popular, that is a comprehensive offering of all of the other 2 boxes, plus additional. So for example, if you were to get a certain item in the smallest of the boxes, that item would still be offered in the large, but in a bigger size. So you're getting everything bigger, plus an extra few items. The first thing is I look for Canadian suppliers and manufacturers. That is something I'm very proud of. I make sure that the products are safe, that they fit into the packages that we offer, obviously. They have to be the proper size and weight. I have approximately 300 items that we have so far that we can order that basically help make people's lives easier. There's snacks, there's self-care items, there's entertainment, a little bit of everything. And basically I try it and test it, and if it's duly approved, then I include it in our packages. So some of the categories that we have is we offer treats, which is, of course, everyone likes treats, no matter how old you are. So we have things like nuts, chocolates, different types of snacks, maybe a handmade piece of jewelry. We also include pieces of jewelry as well, occasionally. We also have our pamper items. So your pamper items would include things like your bath soaks, your specialty lotions, things like that. Two other categories we offer are leisure. Leisure would include things such as puzzles, adult coloring books, paint by numbers, crosswords, word find, Sudoku, if that's how you say it. And we also have items for self-care and health. So masks, sanitizers, sanitizing wipes. They're all natural, non-drying, made with natural ingredients. So they're very good for everyone, especially in this time that we're dealing with.
The world is changing.
So keep up with Rob.
The Rob Snow Show on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Beth Potter joins me this morning on the Rob Snow Show, President, CEO, Tourism Industry Association of Canada, which is a member of the Coalition of Hardest Hit Businesses. Good morning.
Good morning, Rob. How are you today?
I'm okay. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
How's business?
Not so good.
No. Hardest hit, right?
Hardest hit, absolutely.
Yeah, give us a sense of, are there any signs of recovery in the tourism industry in this country at all?
Well, I think it depends on a lot of different things right now.
Okay.
The rollout of the vaccines is obviously paramount. The lifting of restrictions by the health authorities is also needed in order to get, people feel comfortable moving around their province or around the country again.
Yeah.
And the restrictions on businesses around capacity also need to be reconsidered. And then, finally, we need to get the borders open. And so, this summer, it looks like it's going to be not a great summer for the travel and tourism industry.
Not a great summer. Not a great summer. Okay. And in terms of, I want to kind of get some numbers here ahead of you, Beth Potter. Jobs, contributions to the economy, size of the industry. If we have another summer, for example, like last summer, what are we talking about?
Well, the forecast, okay, so I'll start with pre-COVID.
Yeah.
The tourism and travel industry in Canada was a $105 billion industry, employing 1.9 million Canadians.
Wow, okay.
So the forecast for our sector this summer, or for 2021, is that we're going to be down probably around 35%, which means that we will only be bringing in just around 68 billion instead of the 105. So it's a significant dent in economic activity. As important, we've also lost 500,000 jobs. So if you look at, all of the job loss numbers for all of Canada during COVID, we've lost in total 1 million jobs. Half of them come from our suite of sectors.
Half of them. Half of the job losses in Canada have come from your industry.
Yes.
Tourism industry. Wow.
Yes.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I heard yesterday, for example, WestJet, Air Canada, they're starting to resume some flights, for example, to destinations that were previously have been grounded. What should we read into that? What do you read into that?
Well, I think it's fantastic news.
Okay.
I think that as Canadians' confidence in travel returns, we'll see more of those routes added.
Yeah.
And that's a really positive sign. Part of the challenge is going to be, the messaging has been so restrictive. Stay home, don't be with the people that you care about, don't travel. And as people start to feel more confident, as more vaccines get into more arms, and restrictions are lifted, and people start traveling again, we'll see the resumption. Now, it won't all come back at once, but we will see the resumption of flights and businesses, and that is a step in the right direction.
Okay. So your organization, Tourism Industry Association of Canada, is also part of the coalition of hardest hit businesses.
We are.
Which is hardesthit.ca on the web. Very well done website with a pretty simple ask, and you can see all the other organizations that are part of it. I mean, it's events and festivals and live music events and theater, performing arts, these kinds of things. You really would like, and you're calling on, now that we know the date of the federal budget is going to be April 19th, not only the extension, but the enhancement of the wage subsidy and an extension and enhancement of CERS. Tell me about both of those asks, please, if you don't mind.
Well, yeah, so we'd like to see those programs extended to the end of the year. And when we say enhanced, we just want to make sure that seasonal businesses are covered. There's been some challenges there, and so we're just looking for a little bit of work to be done to make sure that we're capturing right down to the smallest tourism business in the country. And the reason that we're asking for it to the end of the year is, as I said earlier, it's not going to be a great summer. And when we do start to see those restrictions eased, and we do start to see people moving around, it's going to be a slow start. And so those businesses that have been, basically were stopped in their tracks a year ago, are going to need continued support as we ramp up travel and tourism again.
Yeah, so the wage subsidy is 75% government covering the wage, right?
Yeah.
Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy. And the CERS is rent, right?
It is rent.
Rent relief, right?
Yeah.
Now that program's been changed. It used to be only the landlord could apply. And the tenant was kind of shut out of the whole process. That's been changed. Has there been, what's your experience? What are your members telling you? More uptake? That must be an improvement, because that was a complaint from day one that I was hearing. So
absolutely, and we've heard from our members saying that change was what they needed. And they want to make sure that they're going to continue to have access to that. And when we talk about those kinds of supports, I mean, this is, while we've got wage subsidy and rent subsidies, fixed costs still remain. So that's why these programs are so incredibly important. Revenues are down, and down significantly, depending on which what sector within our industry that you fall under, but their fixed costs remain, and so that's why these programs are so incredibly important, because they help to kind of plug a hole in the short term.
Right. If those measures aren't extended, what could be the fallout in your industry?
Well, we just completed a survey, and the survey results indicate that 60% of tourism and hospitality businesses across the country will face bankruptcy if they don't get ongoing support.
60%?
Yes.
After already losing 500,000 jobs in the industry. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it will devastate our industry, and that's what's really important to remember. It's not, obviously we employ a lot of Canadians, but travel and tourism isn't just about going on vacation. There's that economic impact that we have as well. We return close to 30 million in taxes to the country.
Okay.
We are the backbone of moving business around the country, across the continent, around the globe. So it's not just about going on vacation. It's about making sure that as an economy, we can continue to grow and continue to move Canadian product and be a significant player on the global stage.
Yeah, there are local members here in the Ottawa area and the Ottawa Valley, Festival of Smiths Falls. Remember the hardest hit business coalition, Ottawa Tourism as well. But it's pan-Canadian members of the hardest hit coalition. I see the Ottawa Gatineau Hotel Association as a member. I'm from Atlantic Canada originally, so I see Cape Breton Island, Discover Halifax. They're members of this coalition as well. Has your organization ever taken a position on this Atlantic bubble? You know, I'd like to get back to my hometown sometime in the next couple of years. You know? Yeah. and tourism for Atlantic Canada is a huge industry, right? So
of course it is. Yeah. I mean, I was talking to some folks in the cruise industry just the other day, and with Transport Canada's order of no cruising again for this year, there are an awful lot of businesses that are going to miss out because the boats aren't going to be coming in. And Atlantic Canada, you know, some of the busiest ports in Canada. So, we do want to see, we want to see bubbles lifted. Have we taken a specific line on the Atlantic bubble? No.
Okay.
What we have said, though, is that Canada really, you know, the federal government needs to take a leadership position on one travel policy for our country and not 10 or 13.
Yeah. And it's not just, you know, when it comes to cruises, it's not just passengers, say, disembarking and going shopping downtown. It's, you know, cruise ships need supplies, right? They need fuel and food and everything else. So
absolutely,
you know, it's a big part of the industry. So
it certainly is.
Yeah.
And it's a great way for us to, as I said before, showcase our great Canadian product.
Yeah. Okay, well, we'll see what happens. Federal budget day is April 19th. What did you think of the Ontario budget? Do you have any reaction to the Ontario budget released yesterday?
Yeah, I do. I thought it was great to see some sector-specific support for the tourism and hospitality industry in that budget yesterday. You know, it's, I think, the first time that Ontario has specifically named the sector and given them sector-specific support. And love the fact that they've recommitted to a travel tax credit to encourage Ontarians to get out and explore their province. So, you know, domestic travel is going to be incredibly important in the next year, maybe two. Mm-hmm. So any kind of encouragement that provinces can give their citizens to get out and do that, I think it's a good thing.
Okay. Thank you, Beth Potter.
Thank you.
Yeah, the president and CEO of the Tourism Industry Association of Canada, member of the Coalition of Hardest Hit Businesses. One of the hardest hit businesses is not real estate. Real estate is booming. The housing market is red hot. And according to a report from the Economics Department at the Royal Bank of Canada, it might be too hot. And the government should actually enact policies to slow down, cool off the red hot housing market. We'll get into that right after the 11:30 news here on City News.
Number 1 for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, the 25th of March. Good morning. I'm Sarah Buck, and right now in Ottawa, we've got some sunshine, a few clouds, and 15 degrees. Smiths Falls is partly sunny and 16. Here's what's making news this hour. The Supreme Court of Canada says the federal carbon price is entirely constitutional. The High Court has decided to uphold part of the Liberal climate change plan that has been challenged by Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Ontario. Chief Justice Richard Wagner says even if one province fails to reduce their emissions, it could greatly impact the rest of the country. The Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act accounts for at least a third of emissions Canada aims to cut over the next decade. Provincial health officials report 152 new cases of COVID-19 in Ottawa today, out of 2,380 new cases across the province. Public Health Ontario also reports 17 more people have died due to novel coronavirus. Today's figures out of over 60,000 tests. Elsewhere locally, 46 new cases in Eastern Ontario, 17 in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark, and 4 new cases in Renfrew County. Canada's COVID-19 vaccine rollout has reached a double-digit milestone as 11% of the country's adult population is now at least partially protected from the virus. Canada's Deputy Chief Public Health Officer, Dr. Howard New, says the country has surpassed the 10% mark of residents over 18 who have received at least one dose of a COVID-19 vaccine. Dr. New adds, however, that 11% is not enough to stop spread of the virus, and the more transmissible variants continue to pose a significant threat as widespread protection is still not established. I'm Sarah Buchan. For News Anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Firm.
Fair.
Fun.
The Rob Snow Show returns
On Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM.
and 1310 AM.
Let's talk about this red-hot housing market. New report out from RBC Economics. And the author is Robert Hogue, who covers macroeconomics, regional analysis, the housing market, provincial economies for RBC Economics. Good morning, Mr. Hogue.
Good morning.
Are we in a bubble, sir?
I think we can say that we are in a bubble in many parts of Canada. When you have home prices rising at more than 20% in some markets, in some cases even more than 30%, I know the market fundamentals are strong, but not that strong. I mean, there's clearly something else happening, and a lot of, and you look at market psychology, a lot of buyers and sellers are expecting further price increases, rapid price increases in the period ahead. So clearly there's psychology there.
Okay. What is driving it? Is it only an interest rate story?
Well, it's a bunch of factors. Obviously, interest rates is probably a big one, but at the same time, there's a lot of demand that's been created by the pandemic itself. People are spending a lot more time in their homes and finding all sorts of issues with them. Space is not enough, so they're moving to new homes, and also Canadians have built up a lot of savings through the pandemic, and so they're deploying that savings in a number of ways, but a big chunk of it goes towards housing. And so these are kind of the pandemic specific kind of reasons. And prior to that, in many markets, there were a lot of supply shortages. Supply was really low to begin with before the pandemic, and part of it was due to demographic reasons. Immigration has been very strong over the last several years. So all this to say that
but there's been almost
to very hot housing markets now.
Sorry, Mr. Hogue. There's been almost no immigration in the last year, though, right?
No, currently, but strong immigration prior to the pandemic had put a lot of pressure on housing stocks in several markets across Canada, including Ottawa, by the way.
Yeah. Okay. It's weird, though, isn't it, that in a period, the last 12 months has been such a strange economy because you've had, incredible weakness in certain sectors. At one point, we had 8 million people unemployed. the greatest drop in economic activity in Canadian history, or at least on record. And at the same time, I mean, the sales of durable goods are way up. Recreational vehicles and a red-hot housing market. It's like an economy with all these dimensions. It's very strange.
It is very strange. And now, if you had asked me 10 months ago if we would be where we are today, specifically with the housing market, I would say there's no way.
Yeah. Well, even CMHC.
Unemployment is still very high. And but what we weren't thinking about 10 months ago was the degree of support coming from governments. So we did not know. We had CERB, but we didn't realize how large this support would be, and also how uneven this pandemic has been in terms of economic shock across. So though, yes, there are some sectors of the economy that have been greatly affected, but others have thrived. So it's been very uneven.
And when I would typically talk to economists about the housing market, this was a big city thing, a big market thing. It's a Toronto thing. It's a Vancouver thing. But now it's a Tillsonburg thing, right? That's what's different this time around. Moncton, Saint Adèle, according to your reporting, Quebec, Mission, British Columbia. These places are red-hot housing markets. How unique is that?
It is very unique. I think I was looking at, when's the last time we saw housing markets being so synchronized? I mean, you always have like hot markets here and cold markets there. I mean, typically housing is very local. But you have to go back to the late 80s to see a highly synchronized upcycle in the housing market. So it is very unusual.
Okay. Why is it problematic? So what if the housing market is hot? It's good that the housing market is hot. People, their equity is growing. They sell houses, make money, stimulates economic activity. It's good for the economy, isn't it? What's wrong with a red-hot housing market?
Yeah, it works for a short period of time, and to be honest, I mean the impulse it gave to the economy since summer has been welcome. And now the issue is if it keeps getting hotter, and the fact that it's the scope of it is as just mentioned, the largest since 1980s, it does raise some stability issue down the road. If or when this overheating stops, you might see some price corrections, and so it may have some fairly significant impact on the economy. That's one thing. But also, if you think of longer-term growth, you need the capital to go towards highly productive parts of the economy. Now,
right.
Housing is attracting a lot of capital right now. It could be a place somewhere a lot more productive in the economy. And thirdly, it does raise some significant inequality issues. Now there is a owner class that's profiting, or that's enjoying good times now, but then think of the renter class that effectively will never be, in some cases, never be able to move to the owner class. So there's some huge inequality issues that's being raised here.
Okay. So I just want to review this. You write, quote here in your brief report, capital used to inflate real estate values isn't going to more productive purposes in our economy. So I would like to maybe expand on this a little bit. It's this idea that maybe, there's so much speculation, for example, happening in the housing market that the data would suggest that the inflows into real estate are now greater than, for example, investments into machinery and equipment, for example. That's problematic, right?
Especially if you consider the case that the governments are running very high deficits. Eventually, we'll have to pay it back, and the least damaging to pay it back is that the economy will grow much faster in the future. So the economy will take care of this debt that governments have accumulated on our behalf. So it is really important that capital goes towards the more productive parts of the economy to ensure that future growth will be maximized.
Okay. Are our lending requirements too loose? You know, in the United States, when the subprime mortgage disaster hit the United States, causing a global financial crisis, a lot of it was related to, loose lending practices. We don't have that same kind of problem in Canada, do we?
No, I mean, when you look at what's been done, there's been several since the great financial crisis. There's been several rounds of policy tightening, just to ensure that those rules aren't too loose. So this is probably not the issue. We're still say that it's still worth monitoring to make sure that those rules are tight enough. And if there are signs that there's some financial troubles on the household side, then by all means let's tighten a little bit more. But right now, this is not the main issue.
Okay, what are your report calls for policy solutions to this? What are some possible things that policymakers should look at?
Well, first of all, is to continue stressing the supply side. I mean, this is pre-existing before the pandemic, so there was just not enough supply, and especially the type of supply that ordinary Canadians need and want, like the more affordable kind of housing.
Right.
And second, let's find ways to discourage speculative activity here.
How do you do that?
Well, a few days ago, New Zealand announced a plan to cool the housing market down. And one of the measures that's been part of this plan has been to stop allowing tax deduction of interest rate being paid for investors, like in the tax system, so that they don't borrow, run up their leverage, and then investing it even more in real estate. So that's one way to kind of tamp down on this speculative activity. A third avenue is to continue to, as I just mentioned, tighten rules, mortgage lending rules if needed.
Yeah. Now you also in your report raised the specter. It's easy to tell you're not a politician. Quote, everything should be on the table, including sacred cows like the principal residence exemption from capital gains tax. There goes your political career, Mr. Hogue.
It's a good thing I'm an economist.
It's a good thing you're an economist.
But that our point is let's look at the regime, right? The policy regime, and this policy regime really has been designed over the years to favor home ownership.
Sure.
And for all sorts of good reasons.
Yes.
And
it builds equity. It creates wealth.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But a lot of that regime has been built during times when interest rates were a lot higher than they are today. So, and in some cases, some of the measures that have been put in place were to a certain extent, counter the effect of higher interest rates to make it easier for first-time home buyers, for example, to get into the market. So, but right now, what we have is a set of housing policies that are encouraged, that are fueling activity. At the same time, when interest rates are incredibly low, even though they've increased, some mortgage rates have increased a little bit over the last few weeks, but they're still incredibly low. So they're all shooting in the same direction. So what we're saying is that let's look at the policy regime and put everything on the table, even sacred cows, and see if they make sense going forward. And our view is that some recalibration is required. But let's have an open mind about it.
Okay. There's a lot of worry, and you've mentioned this before about the haves and have-nots, inequality. Should governments help people buy their first home? Should there be help for first-time home buyers? More help for first-time home buyers?
Yeah, I think those are the kind of questions that that policymakers should be asking.
Okay.
And we point out in our report that right now let's resist providing even more help. I know there's a lot of Canadians out there that are longing to become homeowners. But really, if you add more fuel to the fire, if you have more people jump into jump into the housing market at this particular point in time, and if the supply is fixed, if the supply is not able to absorb this a new influx of buyers, you're just going to exacerbate the problem.
Okay. Thank you so much for your time today. It's greatly appreciated.
It's been my pleasure.
Yep, that's Robert Hogue, RBC Economics on the housing market. This is the Rob Snow Show on City News. When we come back, we'll talk about the carbon tax.
I started, as I said, at Lester's Barber Shop, and it was kind of, it was one of those things that it was just an opportune time for me to get into it, just because he had decided that he was going to retire after the fire, and then the opportunity presented itself that I could open my own shop. And so I went from a 150 square foot space on St. Patrick's Street to a 600 square foot space just on Beechwood to now here, and I'm in a 1,400 square foot space now. And I don't know, it's been an interesting journey because, you think that you're just going to be just you or a really small space, and then all of a sudden, you've got 10 other people working for you. You're in a much bigger space, and even incorporating the boutique. Last March, when all of this started, we closed down a little bit earlier than everybody else, and I'm going to say, being honest, part of it was social pressure. We shut down before everybody else did, and I'm watching all these other salons, just be really responsible and saying we don't want to be a part of the process. So we got ahead of it and closed, and then, the week later, the government's like, everybody's shutting down. And so it was a little nerve-wracking. I guess the first step of us, trying to innovate and just keep moving forward was when the salon is closed, right? It's like, what do you do? Our whole industry is based on being with people, cutting their hair, providing a service. You have to be people together to do that. You can't do that remotely at all. So one of the first things that I saw in our industry, what people were trying to do was they were selling their hair products that they had. And luckily, I've had a website that always had a web store in the back. I just never used it. So as soon as I saw that people were doing that, I was like, okay, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to load up all my stuff. And so that worked out really, really well. And then from there, I managed to find a place that was like a wholesale website that allowed you to have net 60 days. So you don't have to, you can order all the stuff. You don't have to prepay any of it. There's free returns, all that. So that made it really easy for me to bring in other products and start trying to sell it. And so I went from selling hair products to shave products to bath and body products to a little bit of clothing and jewelry, and now it's just morphed into this whole, like, I want to make it a whole legit boutique. And by December of last year, I decided that this is a full-fledged thing and we're going to separate it. It's its own company. So it's really finding an opportunity that's there and running with it. So it's been really fun. Our clients are loving it. Our clients that have been here for a long time, they love it.
He's a pillar of community opinion.
The Rob Snow Show
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
It was a split decision. at the Supreme Court of Canada this morning. Ruling came out. And the Supreme Court of Canada, as we've been reporting since about 10 o'clock this morning, has ruled that the federal government's carbon price is constitutional. We talked about this all this week, and here we go again. Now it's official. And we're joined once more, professor with the University of Ottawa's Centre for Environmental Law and Global Sustainability, Nathalie Chalifour. Good morning.
Good morning.
What do you think of the ruling?
Well, I think it was not entirely surprising, but, you know, the court has given some parameters here for what is possible at the federal level in terms of enacting a minimal national standard for carbon pricing across the country.
Okay. What was the winning argument?
I think the main thing that seems to have convinced the court that this is valid is the spillover effect. So there was a really clear recurring theme throughout the majority judgment that greenhouse gas emissions cause harm. They cause harm at, you know, a global scale, at a national scale. And if we just leave this to individual provinces, there's a risk of unevenness, and there's a risk that we won't be able to do what we need to do as a country to address this issue. So that seemed to be the spillover effects, or the fact that these issues transcend any one particular province, seemed to be a core theme in the reasoning.
Right. What does it say about federalism and the separation of powers? This was such a major component, I think, as it kind of snaked its way through the courts over all of these years, and the division of powers, and 91 of the Constitution Act and 92 of the Constitution Act. What does this say about federalism in Canada?
So I mean, this was going to be a difficult decision regardless, because of the tensions between the provinces and the federal government on this issue. So I find that the majority judgment did a good job of balancing out those two perspectives. So they started their judgment talking about the importance of federalism and talking about the fact that we have to be very careful in upholding federal legislation to make sure that we don't unnecessarily broaden federal powers, but that in certain definable and distinct circumstances, such as this one, there's a valid federal role. So they were very careful not to suggest this is some sort of carte blanche that the federal government can suddenly start, you know, getting engaged in all kinds of issues that better belong within the provinces. The message seemed to be there's room for provincial laws on this, and in fact, the legislation defers to provincial carbon pricing systems, but there's also a role for having a national standard that can make sure there's a level playing field across the whole country.
Right. Okay. Is this the end of it? It's been a long time, right? So.
It has been a long time, and I think it's the end of this particular battle for sure. I mean, at this point, the Supreme Court has ruled. It was a strong majority, 7 judges if you include Justice Cote. She took issue with some of the details of the legislation, but she agreed in principle that there's jurisdiction here. Even the other dissenting judges agreed that there is room in the Constitution for federal laws. They took issue again with the power that was used. But the message is pretty clear that there is, that the federal government can enact this kind of a law. So I think it's the end of this particular battle. That's not to say that there isn't going to be ongoing, political discussions.
Sure. Yeah, political discussions. But as for, can we have a nationally imposed carbon tax on provinces that refuse to enact them? That matter is settled now, because the High Court has said, in my opinion, what I take away from this ruling, knowing very little about it, having been on the air as this is breaking, but having followed it, the High Court has said the climate change does not recognize national or interprovincial borders. It's of national concern, and therefore it has to be taken within the pan-Canadian context, and it's well within the domain of federal authority. Fair enough?
You said it perfectly. And I think, it's important. The court really underscored that there's an urgency here. This is a serious issue. It's not just an environmental issue. It's an economic issue. It's a human health issue. And, unless you think we should do nothing on climate change, we need to get on with it. And this law was pretty carefully designed to be as minimally intrusive as possible, letting the provinces take the lead, using pricing, which is known by economists to be a fair and a cost-effective measure. So lots of efforts were made to try to do this as least intrusively as possible, but obviously, doing what needs to be done on the issue.
Okay. I thank you very much for your time this morning, again, and for helping us navigate through the entire process.
You're very welcome, Rob.
Yeah. That is Nathalie Chalifour from the University of Ottawa Centre for Environmental Law and Global Sustainability. And that'll be our homework, David. We get to go home and read the Supreme Court ruling.
I love homework. Always have.
Because the Constitution Act is set up in a deliberate way, and the division of powers in the Constitution Act are all outlined in Sections 91 and 92. Section 91 of the Constitution says these are all the things you're in charge of at the federal level. The Government of Canada, you're in charge of trade and commerce. You're in charge of navigation and shipping. You're in charge of public debt and employment insurance and the post office and national defense and things like beacons and buoys and lighthouses. And currency and coinage and copyright. And all of that and more. Exclusive domain of the federal government. And then at the provincial government, you have Section 92, and it's more about local works and marriage, things like marriage certificates. Local, private nature, provincial domain, exclusively, okay? And that's what this whole fight was all about. But the winning argument seems to be this one. The High Court has said, we are living in a climate emergency. There is an urgency to this. And the federal government has every authority to use federal power called the Laws for Peace, Order, and Good Government for the Government of Canada. And therefore, it is entirely constitutional and lawful to establish national standards on the pricing of the emissions of greenhouse